Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's
Take two.
We good? No, we're still on. All right, we'll try that again. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our meeting tonight. Let's please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I would like to call to order the regular meeting of the Kings Park Board of Education. Please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. It's also a budget workshop, and we will start with Dr. Egan, who will do a presentation for us.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Just bear with me while I pull up our budget presentation. This is our fourth budget workshop presentation. It is our third draft of the budget. And you'll see a little bit of good news. The levy has decreased since the last time we were together. Last time we were together, we were looking at a levy increase of 2.61%. We've done a little bit of work on that, and that is now down to 2.48%. Again, the levy is the increase in the amount that the community supports for the budget. Unfortunately, we are still working on a budget gap, and I will explain where that gap is and how it results in a minute. We have a particularly challenging budget development process this year. First of all, the tax cap is CPI or 2%, whichever is less. In this case, CPI is 1.23 this year, and this limits the growth of the tax levy, which is both a good and a bad thing. And I'll elaborate on that in a few minutes. Kings Park, unfortunately, is currently projected to receive less state and federal aid next year than in the current year. And it's a large amount. It's $429,046 less in aid. And again, I'll elaborate on that a little bit more in a minute. We're also, as we're putting this budget together, projecting to what we anticipate school is going to look like in September. Yes, we do project that all of our students will be in class, and we want to best prepare financially for what that's going to look like. And when we go through staffing later tonight, you'll see some specifics, but particularly in this budget, we've tried to get class size lower and as low as we possibly can. For just that reason. So if we look at the numbers from last time, really only one number on this sheet changed. It's debt service reserve that's going to be applied to next year's budget. This is one of the reasons why the tax levy amount drops from 2.61 to 2.48. We are still taking a close look at our kindergarten registrations, which is always a projection and an estimate. We won't really know what the final numbers will look like until at some. There are also additional considerations that may come up between now and the time that we finalize our budget in early April. We do still have a bunch of open items on the revenue side of the budget. Again, we're currently projecting a levy increase now at 2.48. We want to continue to look at our state aid numbers. Currently, we're working with the governor's proposal in our budget. The legislative proposal is typically a little higher than that. We got to keep a close watch on how negotiations are going up in Albany on the budget. And the other thing we need to keep an eye on is federal stimulus aid. Washington continues to talk about an additional stimulus package. This package may provide some additional direct or indirect assistance to schools, and that may help us out substantially. So again, we're still looking at this gap, and we're gonna make a couple of recommendations in terms of staffing later on in the meeting that'll help bridge that gap a little bit. It is a cyclical process. We do continue to look at areas of efficiency as we move forward on a daily and sometimes weekly basis. We're looking to see what happens to our state aid. We're looking to see what, if any, additional federal stimulus money come our way. And of course, at the end of the process, we'll evaluate if the district wants to apply fund balance or reserves to the 21-22 budget. In a nutshell, here's kind of where we are today. We 98.3 million in things we would like in the budget on the expenditure side, and we need to balance that out with revenue on the right-hand side. The tough part of that is that our levy is capped and cannot grow more than a certain amount by law. And our state aid package, we typically do not know 100% until on or about April 1st. This currently leaves us with a little bit of an uncomfortable gap scenario of $759,000 to maintain all of our current programs and services that we're still working on. The good news for us in Kings Park is that we have been very fiscally responsible over the last many years. When I took over in 2014, I inherited a budget that was susceptible to fiscal stress. We've worked very hard to get to no designation and stay there, which is the best designation you can have. This budget, I'm anticipating we will need to apply some level of fund balance and reserves. You want to be very careful because one way of getting back on the susceptible to fiscal stress list is relying on your fund balance and reserves on a yearly basis, which is the essential analogy of relying on your bank account to pay your bills and not your revenue to pay your bills. We have a few additional dates where we will be working on the budget. 2 weeks from now, March 16th, is our final budget workshop. Typically,
I lost my volume.
State aid will be locked up on April 1st. We then adopt the budget after we know our complete aid package on April 13th. The budget hearing scheduled for May 11th and an all-important budget vote on May 18th. We're going to go through a large number of sections of the budget tonight. Many of these are very small sections, and they should go relatively quickly, with the largest section being the last one, which is class size and staff. The first section is also mine. It's the Board of Education, District Clerk, and Superintendent's budget. Points of pride for our governance team includes establishing written goals for 7 years in a row. We have a bond referendum, which is nearing year 6, which will be the final year of that project. We've done a tremendous amount of good in Kings Park in terms of that bond work over the last 5 years. I hope you enjoy my highlights of the week, newsletters, We leverage Facebook, Twitter, and email communications. Some of you may be sick of my daily COVID email communications, but we endeavor to supply the community with ongoing communications. And of course, increase student voice in decision-making, things like our Safe Pride Committee, things of that nature. Student voice, incredibly important. If you look at our budgets for next year, you'll see that in total, the superintendent's budget, the district clerk and the board budget is increasing by $250. And the only reason the cost of certain memberships are going to go up. The board and I are members in various organizations, NISCUS, Suffolk County Council of Superintendents, NISBA, Nassau Suffolk School Boards, things of that nature. We do expect dues and memberships to go up about $250, which is a very small increase for next year. And again, this budget continues to focus on district goals, student needs. We have an energy performance contract that we're hoping to break ground on this coming spring. Professional development, our graduation ceremony, dues and memberships, the budget vote and board elections in May, our adult education program, outreach with the community, and survey tools and other electronic communication mechanisms. All right, I'm going to tag in Mrs. Meehan, who is our business official, who will walk us through the business office budget. Mrs. Meehan?
Thank you, Dr. Egan. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be walking through the business office as well as undistributed accounts. And what I mean by that is basically all of our other budget codes which don't have a home. They're not specifically for a building or for a department. They're basically district-wide codes. So we lump them in with the business office. So some points of pride for our business office. This past year, we completed the district's 6th comprehensive annual financial report for the year ended June 30, 2020. It's basically an enhanced financial annual report where we provide more statistical information, more historical information, more detail behind our numbers for the reader, for people to understand where our numbers are coming from and what the district's mission and how we're supporting that with our financials. We're able to do that because our internal controls are so strong, and we have a very hardworking staff that's able to pull that together for us each year. So with the completion of that report, we've earned the International Association of School Business Officials Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting each year, as well as the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting each of those 6 years as well. We continue to focus on efficiencies and what we can do faster and more cost effectively within the business office. We have WinCap Web for payroll, where the individuals, they get their direct deposits. They no longer get stubs or anything physical. All of their support, including W-2s, is electronic, and they have access to that information electronically. We also have been moving towards electronic payments to vendors rather than checks, saving in cards, check stock, and postage and ink. So continue to look for areas of efficiency, saving both time and money. Next slide, please. So I've just highlighted a few, about 6 or 7 codes within those business office and undistributed accounts, basically the areas that have the most change year from the current year to next year proposed. The first line there you see is our bond counsel, fiscal advisor, and Moody code. That's going down as we had our last bond borrowing, and we continue now to just get back into where we have our annual tax anticipation note borrowing each year. So there is a cost, but it's going down. We'll have our 3rd energy performance contract, and once that gets through as well, that line will continue to see a decrease. The next line is the fire and casualty insurance line. Now this is a projection, so we do have a month left in budget development, and working with NYSER, we might get a clearer number there and perhaps be a little lower than what I have proposed right now for 21-22. It should also be noted we have additional cyber security insurance given the conditions we are seeing in the past year or two. The next two codes are our retirement system codes. So as you all know, the employer has to contribute towards employees' retirement system, as well as the employee itself. So we have a contribution rate that we contribute. The employee retirement system is for our non-teaching staff, and the teacher's retirement line is for our teachers and administrators. So both those lines are going up, and that's a function of the rate going up as well as our payroll going up. It's fortunately not as much of an increase as we have seen in the past, but that is an area where we are given that each year. Not much of that we can control. The next line is our unemployment insurance. And you'll recall earlier this year, we had to do a budget transfer into that code. So we have increased that line for next year with the costs we've been seeing there coming through. And then finally, we see a decrease in our transfer to capital line. Now that line, for the past 3 years, we had money allocated for the security vestibules in each of our buildings. And now we are complete with that. We have security vestibules in all of our buildings. So we no longer need that code, and that helps us out for our budget development. So overall, all of these codes, which it does encompass a lot because it's all of those other codes that are district-wide, we're up $889,207 and 2.77%. Next slide, please. So basically, this budget supports all of our business office operations, the benefits for eligible staff, and all of our required services such as audits, inventory, legal fees, insurance. And you'll see some of our business office staff. I believe we have 2 or 3 missing from that photo, but we are a lean office, but very, very hardworking. I'm very proud of everybody. They do a fantastic job. So now I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Colby Rooney to go through the Office of Pupil Personnel.
Thank you, Ms. Meehan. Good evening, everyone. I'll present to you this evening the budget for the Office of Pupil Personnel Services. This past year, we were faced with some unique challenges, which resulted in the enhancement of our existing programs and services. As a result of the emergency closure, we had to shift many of our support systems to remote platforms. You'll see this through the implementation of the remote kindergarten registration and screening process that occurred this past year. We also continued focusing this shift on additional online progress monitoring tools for our English language learners. This included a partnership with Eastern Suffolk Boces through our Title I consortium to implement a new progress monitoring system that will assess our students' language acquisition needs. Our special class programs were also adjusted this year to provide both daily in-person and remote support during our extended or summer school program. And in addition, we continue to focus on our youth mental health and wellness with the outstanding efforts of our support staff. The staff diligently provided digital and in-person social emotional opportunities for our students and their families throughout the closure and throughout the school year. Next slide, please. In the development of the 2021-22 school year budget, we anticipated the need to maintain and enhance our services for our students. Reflected in our budget, you're going to see an increase in our consultant line. This increase is a result of addressing additional costs that were associated with some changes in the implementation of services to include both in-person, but also remote or telehealth services. We also increased our special education software and our district-wide materials and supply lines. This was a result of the need to take a look at some additional online supportive programs that we're currently using in the classrooms, as well with some of our remote students. Our budget also addresses several reductions. You'll see reductions in our tuition lines. This is a result of a decline in our student enrollment that we anticipate for the 2021-22 school year, as well as a shift to our online professional development supports, which resulted in a decline in in-person attendance at conferences and therefore a reduction in our conference expenses. Overall, the Office of Pupil Personnel budget will reflect a decrease in expenses by approximately 3.1%. Next slide, please. Moving forward, this budget will continue to focus on the enhancement of mental health supports and services. We'll continue to maintain our supports through the Committee on Special Education and Preschool Education. We'll also continue to look at the enhancement of opportunities for our English language learners, both instructionally and through a progress monitoring lens. This budget's also going to continue to maintain and support the many functions that take place through the Office of Pupil Personnel. At this time, I would like to introduce Dr. Cardizana to present the curriculum budget.
Thank you, Dr. Colby-Rooney. Good evening, everybody. I would just like to highlight some components of the curriculum budget for the 21-22 school year. There are many points of pride this year, but I think that the major theme has been the infusion of instructional technology in our curriculum, which supports the district-wide theme of learning together through technology. Some highlights and some components to that work this year. We've expanded our use of Castle Learning to now include the middle school. We have utilized an Explore learning platform, in particular the Gizmos module. And this has helped with virtual science simulations, knowing the COVID-19 restrictions and trying to reinforce laboratory skills and experiences for students. We've been using the Gizmos as a science simulator, and it's been supporting our curriculum. We've expanded the use of the STAR assessments now right through grade 8. So grades 6, 7, and 8, and those assessments are given 3 times a year in ELA and math, and that's just another data point to monitor our students' growth. We've expanded the Readers Workshop this year to now include students in kindergarten and grade 1. We now have a complete articulated reading program for kindergarten right through grade 5. Always a highlight, and this year in particular, the Independent Science Research Program. We've had a Regeneron Science Talent Search Scholar, and we're very proud of that work of the program. And our science The Huntington Arts Council has been a nice partnership for the school district. We belong to the Journeys program, and you can see one of our students has been recognized for their digital artwork and submission, and it's been highlighted in the Arts Cultural News publication of the Huntington Arts Council. Part of our membership with the Journey program with the Huntington Arts Council is they do provide us these discovery lending chests, which support our social studies curriculum, and they're artifacts from many different countries, and they rotate in and out visiting our schools, in particular our middle school, on a regular basis. So they're just some points of pride for this year in the area of curriculum. Taking a look at some budget summaries and some codes. Taking a look at the first one, the Boces Castle Learning. As I mentioned, we've expanded that this year to include our middle school students and staff. The second one is the outdoor learning. It's a Boces code. We want to keep this in the budget for next year. Western Suffolk Boces has a wonderful facility. It's right in the Sunken Meadow Park, and it houses many opportunities for students for learning and supporting environmental science, life science, and earth science. So hopefully we'll be able to get back to that. In addition to that code, Boces will also offer experiences where they'll come to the school and provide demonstrations and interactive labs for students. Next code talks about professional development. That's the bulk of our curriculum budget, and that would include all professional development for our teachers and administrators, Boces workshops, our frontline platform of My Learning Plan, which tracks all of the professional development for our certificated employees, and also all of the ELA math, science, and social studies workshops that our lead teachers attend. Next code talks about Boces library automation. We've increased our use of databases for our library, given the fact that we are a one-to-one school now with Chromebooks for students all the way up through grade 12. So we've expanded that, and also the increases in some of those subscriptions. And the last line talks about our digital curriculum with Putnam Northern Westchester Boces, and that is our social studies curriculum, which includes links to the Discovery Ed platform. So overall, we're looking at an increase of 1.3 or $4,958 for the 21-22 school year. This budget will support continued curriculum resources and development for all of our disciplines. The 2 new proposed advanced placement courses at the high school, which are computer science principles and human geography, the constant integration of instructional technologies, all platforms and programs that integrate and support teaching and learning K-12, and professional development for our teachers and administrators. I believe my colleague, Mr. Craig, will present the personnel budget at this time.
Yes, thank you and good evening. I'm going to take the board through the personnel budget, and then afterwards the class size and staffing projections for next year. So personnel budget first is fairly straightforward. Certainly points of pride as we do each year, prideful of our instructional and non-instructional staff, ensuring a safe and professional work environment. So all the money within the personnel budget has really gone towards recruiting our both instructional and non-instructional staff. Next slide. So basically, it's a very small budget in personnel. So the items you see here are really essential items. Boces teacher certification. That is used to track certification for all new teachers we are looking to hire. In addition, making sure all our current teaching staff is properly certified as well. The Boces online application, that is how we recruit for all of our positions in Kings Park. So recruiting for administrators, teachers, and non-instructional staff. So that's how we post and recruit for all positions. And the ASOP system, that is our substitute software system where we fill all our substitute openings at our school buildings. So here you just see slight increases due to those services that we use. So the total budget increase is a budget increase of 1.79. Next slide. And this will support the continuation of recruiting and hiring high quality teachers, staff members, custodians for next school year. Okay, next slide is a class size and staffing. So looking first, Fort Salonga will be the first one. So these are projections for next school year. So keep in mind as we look at this, first we have kindergarten. We're using a placeholder of 100 students. Certainly, as Dr. Egan noted earlier, that will be a moving target that we will watch throughout the springtime. Historically, it's been about 90, a little higher last school year. So right now looking at 100 students. Then we have projections for next school year. If you look at the bottom, we have the K-3 remote. Currently, this year being unique, we have remote sections. So those are the students currently in remote instruction. So when you see those two staff positions, those are two shared positions between Fort Salonga and Parkview. So for example, the K1 is a K1 class for Parkview and Fort Salonga, and the 2-3 is also a shared position with Parkview and Fort Salonga as well. One item of note, when looking at the projected enrollments, those remote students are part of that current enrollment right there. So they're part of the current class sizes projected for next school year. So if we were to have remote classes again next year, these class sizes would be about a student or two less. But looking at current projections, 20 students in kindergarten, projecting 19 in grade 1, grade 2, 21, and grade 3, 21 as well. So remaining staff neutral, just taking one teaching position or section from grade 3, applying to grade 1. Also keep in mind, these are classroom averages. They could vary a little bit. Oftentimes principals, when building their classes, they're looking at student need and academic need, things such as inclusion students in special ed, E&L students. So there could be a class a few sections, maybe one student less and one a bit higher, but these are your basic class averages for next year for Fort Salonga. Next slide. These are just looking at your specials for Fort Salonga next year. Once again, remaining staff neutral. You'll see special education is in gray. Once again, staffing is not confirmed for next year, but we are remaining staff neutral next year in special ed. But as we go through the CSC and annual review process, we may sometimes move staffing from one building to the next to meet student needs for next school year. And then you'll see we're remaining staff neutral in all our specials, E&L reading, math support, and also our support services for psychologist, social worker, and speech as well. Next slide. Looking at Parkview, similar again, using 100 as a placeholder for kindergarten. We were at 107 this school year. Once again, those are those shared remote sections with Fort Salonga. So that's the current remote sections at Parkview. Those remote students are currently in the projected enrollment for next year for the class sizes. So looking at next year, 21 for grade 1, 21 for grade 2, and 19 for grade 3. just taking one section from grade 3, which is a bit smaller, applying it to grade 1. And that's remaining staff neutral, just a little bit of a change. Next slide. Similar to Fort Salonga, once again, special education right now, looking at 5.5, and all other specials remaining staff neutral, and remaining our support services as well with social workers, psychologists, and speech. Next slide is RJO. So looking at RJO, coming into this school year, we had added 2 additional sections prior to the school year to make sure we had small class sizes. Keeping in mind, RJO is a bit of a unique building. The classrooms are actually a little bit smaller. So this is including keeping the 2 additional sections that we added this school year. Mr. Massimo recommending just adding 1 section to grade 4 and 1 lesson grade 5, but remaining staff neutral. What that would do is give us a class size of 18 in grade 4 and a class size of 21 in grade 5. Keep in mind, and this was true for Fort Salonga as well, that the special class there, that's our self-contained students. So they are a separate section on their own, and that's really reflected in the special education staffing. Also similar to Parkview and Fort Salonga, these are what the 4 or 5 remote class for this school year. So that was the enrollment for this year, but those students are in the current enrollment projections for next school year for class sizes of 18 and 21. Next slide. Once again, similar, remaining staff neutral in all our special area classes and also support services, remaining staff neutral. Next slide is William T. Rogers. So looking at William T. Rogers grade 6, once again, we're noting the special class students for self-contained. Currently this year, we have 8 sections in grade 6. So that would be class sizes of 28 for next school year. So that is a bit high, a bit of a concern. So there will be some options looking at grade 6 for next school year. So we'll see when we get to the end of the presentation on slide 45. We're going to we can look at either 8 sections for a class size of 28, or having 10 sections. The middle school is teamed, so it'll be a 2-person team, and that would bring that class size down to 22. So looking at next year with maybe still some concerns over class size and spacing, that may be the better option. Looking at class sizes in grades 7 and 8, very good class sizes. Looking at 10 sections for both grades, 20 and 21. Once again, we do have the accelerated courses at the middle school, so sometimes those courses may run a little bit higher, bringing your regular classes a bit lower, but these are your average class sizes right now for William T. Rogers. Next slide. Once again, remaining staff neutral in all specials, home and careers, foreign language, technology, phys ed and art, music, all remaining staff neutral for next year. Next slide, please. Once again, as I noted earlier, special education still in the process of doing CSEs, but right now projecting 13 and remaining staff neutral with all support services, guidance, social worker, speech, and psychologist. Kings Park High School, these are the enrollment projections for next school year. So looking at next year, 223 for our freshmen grade 9. We actually have 233 going on Enrollment Trends. We anticipate maybe 10 students leaving for private or parochial school. So we're using 223 as the placeholder, 212 in grade 10, 217 in grade 11, and 279 in grade 12. Next slide. So for the most part, remaining staff neutral at the high school, just some slight reductions due to enrollment. So you'll see on the slide just a 0.2 reduction in math and a 0.1 reduction in phys ed. All other content areas remaining staff neutral. Next slide. Once again, all support services, social worker, psychologist, guidance counselor, speech, all remaining staff neutral. This also allows all advanced placement classes to run for next school year as well. So going back to some options for next school year. So really what we provided was a staff neutral for the most part for next school year. So option one would be to roll over our current staffing right now. Option two would be to reduce all added positions for 2021. So that would be the 3 remote positions and those 2 additional sections at RJO. But if we did that option, that would lead to higher class sizes in grade 4 and 5, going up to 20 and 23, which may be a little too tight in that building. Option 3 was reduce the 3 elementary remote positions. And you can see there's a dollar amount applied to each of these options. And then there's option 4, which is what we are recommending. And that would be reducing the 3 elementary remote positions, looking towards next September being a bit more normal, applying to those positions to that grade 6. So if you remember, we had those class sizes of 28 in grade 6 that we reduced those to 22. And that would still have a savings of $103,150. And that is inclusive of salary and benefits. And then at the secondary level, it's the minus 0.3 for the slight reductions in math and phys ed. So that is a summary of enrollment projections and staffing for next school year.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Craig. And that brings our budget presentation for this evening to a close.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your presentations. I'm going to open it up for questions from the board, but I do have to mention that Mr. Bianco is with us tonight. He is remote from home, but Mr. Tu is working and was not able to be with us. So do we have any on the board? Any comments?
I guess more or less a comment, kind of. We know that we're still in deficit, so I know it's a fluid document that we're working with. One of my concerns is the staffing for the 6th grade. I like going with that out. I like how you went with that option. Class size has always been a priority for us on the board here. So I really like to keep a close eye on that. Keeping in line with what we believe.
Okay. Anyone else?
I would thank everybody for the presentation. It's very helpful. I think, along those lines, some of the things that we have been able to do this year, and maybe some of the things we will continue to be able to do this year, have been because of some of our class size, and it's given us flexibility. And I think as we look ahead to September and not knowing exactly what that's going to look like, we've talked a lot about space, and a lot of that depends on class size. And so, while we do have the budget to worry about and close the rest of that gap, I think we're making progress, and some of the savings that we can achieve on those options yet bring that class size down so that we can fit in the space that we have, based on what we think September might look like, does make a lot of sense.
Thank you. I want to echo the same sentiments. This board has worked diligently for years now trying to get class size down. So class size has always been very important to us, and 28 in a 6th grade class is a lot, but also to September, we do everything we can to keep our classes small so that we can bring everybody back without issues, because that is the most important thing, is getting everybody back here and keeping everyone safe.
And if I could just add one thing, we didn't talk about it too much tonight, but we used the same philosophy when we looked at the high school as well. We probably, with a declining enrollment at the high school, we probably could have cut back a little bit more there. But again, trying to keep class size as low as we can for September. We're only recommending a very small, what I call shaving of staff. And, again, using that same philosophy at the high school, I think that'll be very important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Egan. Okay. So next we have our COVID-19 update. Dr. Egan.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Give me 1 minute. And while I'm pulling this up, I'll just thank the board for the opportunity to give an update on COVID-19. Okay, so we started an unprecedented year with an overarching rare goal. And our goal was to safely re-enter school. Our schools had largely been closed by executive order of the governor since March. We wanted a job of assessing where our children were academically and on a mental health basis. And then our goal 100% was, once we got everybody back in, we wanted to make sure that we were going to remain there. And I'm super proud of the fact that February 25th was our 100th day of school. I'll mention this later in the program, but we did not have to close any of our schools during the second wave in December, January, and February for anything COVID-19 related. We may be the only school district in our region that can say that. Many districts were closed for remote instruction only on either side of the New Year's recess and also after February break. We felt that it was very important that we remain consistent and that we remain open. Some days that was harder than others, but we were able to pull that off. And we have slowly expanded in our offerings. We expanded in the fall. We expanded since the fall, and we're obviously considering expanding once again now that the infection rate is consistently on the way down. Again, special thanks to the 90+ individuals that helped get us back into school in September safely. Again, as of today, we've remained in school for 103 days. And as we said we would, we've continued to monitor and evaluate. The parent survey that was administered last week is another example of garnering some input from the community, and looking forward to presenting that data in a few minutes. I also want to emphasize that we were able to gradually and deliberately expand in a few targeted areas since the fall. One of the pieces of Department of Health guidance pointed us in the direction of prioritization for return to in-person instruction. First, with those that might have issues when it comes to educational or other need, mental health, so on and so forth. And we've largely done this through our instructional support teams on the secondary level, through our mental health staff and some of our other support staff. And again, during the infamous second wave in December through February, we did not need to close any of our schools for any reason associated with COVID-19. Truth be told, at one point, we were down to our last bus driver, and I believe it was the high school that we had some significant attendance issues due to COVID-19 related issues with staff and either them or their families. But we were able to continue to remain open and consistent during that time. So we still have the same three enduring challenges. All districts face these enduring challenges, but a little different. They are transportation, dining when students are eating without a mask, and our instructional space. It's very important to note that our school district has one of the lowest remote-only student population in the area. There's one district that's a little lower than us, but other we're about 9%, between 8 and 9%. Most of our surrounding districts are going to be in the 20 to 30% range, which does make our challenges a little bit greater than some. If we were looking to schedule only 80 or 70% of our students, that would be a little easier. So again, kind of a unique challenge that we face here in Kings Park. In terms of busing, I want to thank the families that have really taken on the responsibility of transporting their children to school this year. It's been super helpful, particularly on the elementary level and on the middle school level. Currently, we have we've tried to keep the children only in the same family sitting together, or maybe a really good friend on the bus, or maybe children that are in the same class, because they're in the same class together all day long anyway. We did collect some ridership data from both the middle school and the high school. The high school is really not an issue. We know that bus ridership on the high school level is low, and you might suspect that, and you would be 100% right. It's really the middle school that's a little bit more problematic. If we are going to transition to having more students in school on a daily basis, some students would need to be seated 2 in a seat. That will be a deviation from CDC DOH recommendations, but that would be something that we would have to be able to live with in the area of transportation. Lunch is an enduring challenge for us and for all school districts. The guiding is very clear, which for the most part calls for 6 feet of social distancing when eating lunch. The reason is you're not wearing a mask. Unlike some of our surrounding districts, our secondary schools only have 1 lunchroom. The lunchroom at the middle school is also doubling as the auditorium. One very important thing to note is that over February break, we did have our annual fire inspection, which I'll refer to later in the presentation. This is super important because our fire inspector cited us on having lunch tables between the cafeteria and the gymnasium at the middle school. He said that those tables in the hallways were a fire violation and we were required to remove them and come up with an alternative solution for that. But fire code and fire inspection remains an ongoing challenge, not only with lunch, but also in the materials that we use for barriers in COVID-19 mitigation. On the elementary level, we can overflow into classrooms. That's not always readily possible on the secondary level. We do have a couple of overflow spaces that we can use, but they're somewhat limited. So again, lunch becomes a bit of a limiting factor, especially in the winter months when you can't go outside. We do have additional tables that we purchase, picnic tables that can go outside at the middle school and the high school. We will certainly use them as soon as the weather permits that. And then we can expand outside a little bit at lunch, but until the weather improves, we know we had a wind chill this morning of 8 degrees. We're obviously hopeful that later this spring, we'll have more options there. We do have some solutions in motion in terms of increasing our lunch capacity, which is super critical if we're going to bring students into school daily for more in-person instruction. And the solution involves Lexan, which is also polycarbonate, which is clear plastic. They're barriers. There are some other materials that do not meet fire code. We're required to use a polycarbonate barrier. And again, they're clear. It's like plexiglass, but a slightly different material that meets fire code. Depending on the activity in the classroom, CDC guidance called between 36 and 144 square feet per student for social distancing. Like any surrounding districts, middle school does not have a large auditorium. Again, our auditorium is also a cafeteria at the middle school. So we run out of some overflow areas that some other districts have that they can readily use. At the high school, our Boces tech students are utilizing our library currently. So we run out of library space very quickly. And in measuring our middle school and our high school classrooms, they do vary by size, ranging from about 600 to 840 square feet on the floor. Our English and social studies classrooms at the high school are probably our smallest. Those are the classrooms on the front of the building, closest to the main entrance. Most are about 700 square feet with approximately 550 square feet of student space. So this is why currently our secondary classrooms can support about 15 students when we are abiding by 6 feet of social distance. Desk barriers similar to our elementary model would help us to expand our capacity in our secondary rooms. To date, we have not gone in that direction, but that may be a definite need as we move towards the concept of bringing more students in school every day. And if we look back at November 10th, 2020, that was one of the last times that we got written guidance from Department of Health Services. The interesting thing is if you look at the infection rate and what it's been in Suffolk County over the last week or so, and you go back and look at where we were on November 10th, it's actually very similar. And this was an exact quote from the Suffolk County Department of Health on November 10th. So if we look at our instructional space today, here are a couple of pictures from William T. You'll see there's a little bit of space in the front of the room. This is so that the students are not right on top of the display, and the teacher has a little bit of space to move around and touch the display and perform teaching and learning. And you'll see the space between our desks at the middle school, and they're spaced about 6 feet apart. If you go to the high school, same idea, but a little different. At the high school, they have not removed the extra desks. They're just in tandem with each other. And the A students, I believe, are on the left, and the B students are on the right, so they don't use the same desks. You do have a little bit of space in the front here. Yes, these desks could be scooted forward a little bit if needed. You see by tape measure off to the side there, although I discovered that the floor tiles are 1 foot by 1 foot, so the tape measure was not needed. But you kind of get the idea of how our classrooms are currently set up. And again, to date, we have not used any desk barriers because for the most part, students are already spaced 6 feet apart and barriers were not needed. So what changed? In early February, we got some good news from the state. The state had been threatening us with a 20% cut in aid since, I want to say, right after the budget was approved last year. The governor was very clear that he had powers in the budget to reduce state aid, and at numerous points in time was threatening to reduce state aid by 10 or even 20%. We found out in early February that that was no longer going to be an option, that we would be made whole in our state aid for the current year. And that was super good news. And then on February 12th, we finally got some updated written guidance from the CDC. This was super important because it was the first piece of updated written guidance that we had received since the end of the summer or the early fall. We kind of knew this was coming, so we were waiting to see as a region and certainly as a school district what would be included in this written guidance. Again, we received it the Friday right before February break and spent much of the February break analyzing it for action when we would return from February break. We also received our annual fire inspection over the break. I mentioned that earlier. The fire inspector was very clear on what we can and can't do in terms of desks and space and hallways and things of that nature. And like I said, we actually did receive a citation for looking to expand lunch into the hallway. Now, we've all heard rhetoric from Washington and the governor talking bringing students back in for in-person learning. I want to emphasize that most of this rhetoric has been aimed at complete states that are still on 100% full remote and areas of the country where students have yet to return to school for in-person learning. The state of Maryland is one example. I believe they're scheduled to return to hybrid learning very shortly. I know because I have friends in Virginia, that Virginia is finally back to school on a hybrid nature, very similar to what our students are experiencing now and have been since the early fall. In New York, Buffalo City Schools was the last school district to open for in-person learning. This just happened within the last few weeks. So across New York, there's been vast disparity in school districts that have been able to provide in-person learning. We know what we know from our experience on Long Island, but this has not, what we've been able to accomplish on Long Island has not necessarily been the norm across the country and across the state. Long Island as a region has largely been the leader in maximizing in-person student learning during the pandemic.
And Dr. Egan, just to emphasize that point with conversations with friends of mine that I've grown up with, as nearby as New Jersey, in communities, in a community very much like ours, their secondary students are in 2 days a week, half days. Likewise, in Massachusetts, their secondary students are in 2 days a week. So I know, we always want to strive for better, and we all want the kids in 5 days, but it is, I think it is important to take a step back at times and see what others, what we've been able to accomplish.
Good point, Mr. Bianco. Thank you. So what happened on February 12th? What did the CDC tell us? There's a link in the presentation, which will be posted to the website tomorrow. But the CDC established what they call a continuum of risk for schools. The lowest risk, which is virtual only schools, all students at home. That would be the state of Maryland that I mentioned before. Some risk, medium risk, high risk, and highest risk. To date, we have largely operated with some risk or medium risk. We do have a small portion of our population, about 8 or 9%, that is lowest risk, that have chosen to access school from home, and we've supported them with that. deviating from our cohorted model, the AB model, and increasing student density raises our risk level. And we would certainly be operating at that point in mostly in the high risk category, but in the highest risk category in areas where class size might be a little higher. One page, this is an exact quote from page 11 of their guidance. It talks to physical distancing. We still see that 6 feet recommendation. Distancing is essential, and emphasis on alternatives when physical distancing is not always, and that becomes important. So what the CDC did was they created some colored models, very similar to what we did at the beginning of the school year. Low transmission is blue. Currently, thank goodness, this is where we are today. We've consistently been under 5% as a region in Suffolk County. We actually just spiked a little bit yesterday. We were at 4.9%. For the few days before that, we were closer to 4%, but our numbers have continued to come down, which is good. Again, we are currently in that low transmission range, and they list 5 key mitigation strategies that all schools must implement, which includes everything that we've currently been doing. Universal use of masks, physical distancing, hand washing, respiratory etiquette, cleaning, contact tracing, things of that nature. If we then flip forward a little bit, you know, again, CDC recommendation, you're in that blue region, and you'll see 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible. And then as the percentage infection rate goes up, you'll see language, physical distancing required. And that's a very important distinction, to the greatest extent possible versus required. And again, emphasizing that. And really, this is where the last several weeks have been focused on. What exactly does this mean in practice? A virtual panel discussion last week. I had distributed the link if parents wanted to listen to that recording. It was an interesting conversation, mostly zooming in on physical distancing. But the CDC does seem to open the door to that verbiage to the greatest extent possible, as opposed to being mandatory. But it is a function of infection rate, which is very important. So risk management is something that is incredibly important to me. I then took that CDC guidance, had lengthy conversations with our legal team, Ingram and Smith, who gave us advice relative to that guidance and Department of Health guidance. Our insurance carrier, which is NYSER, is an important partner in our risk management plan. I had conversations with the Vice President of Risk Management for NYSER, which is again our insurance company. We did reach out to the New York State Department of Health and the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, had lengthy conversations with them. Unfortunately, they were very reluctant to issue anything in writing, but we did have conversation in terms of things that we were thinking about in terms of our plan moving forward. The single most important takeaway from my conversations with our legal team and our insurance carrier is this sentence that I put in quotes down here about being prudent and responsible. Super important, and that's my recommendation as we continue to move forward, that we continue to be prudent and responsible and calculated, and not let decisions, but let science and data and logic and what we know about the virus to drive our decisions moving forward. So important to know what hasn't changed. We're still working on some budget challenges for next year, and we talked about that in the prior presentation. We are still working off of New York State guidance. Although we diligently tried to get an update from them, we were not successful. Similar with Suffolk County Department of Health Services. We have elicited and spoken to medical professionals in the area, which is an important piece of that. We have a contact at St. Catherine's, and I'll circle back around to that in a few minutes. And the general science regarding the transmission of COVID-19. We know that older children transmit like adults and younger children don't. And that's not only accepted medical science regarding transmission of the virus, but we've seen that in our schools. And that remains an ongoing concern. That again, adults and older students will transmit very similarly. Fire code is very important, and I mentioned that. And lastly, there are close contacts and there are direct contacts. Close contact has been in our vocabulary for some time, as our students will sometimes have close contact in school. Direct contacts have become important now that high-risk sports are back up and running again. Sports are higher risk because they involve direct contact. Direct contact is an automatic quarantine. Close contact has this 6 feet or 10-minute piece that goes with it. And that's just something to keep in mind, and that's important. So what are we still waiting on? One thing that we do need to be mindful of is OSHA, which is an organization that's designed to protect employees and students from a variety of hazards, one of which is air quality, is supposed to come out with an update on March 15th involving stringent ventilation standards. That's something that we need to watch very closely. What's important is that the colder weather, where it is difficult to achieve these ventilation standards, where, this morning there was a wind chill of 8 degrees. Probably not many of our classroom windows were open this morning, which is not good. We want ventilation. Thankfully, as we move towards the end of March and especially the beginning of April, ventilation will be less of an issue as the warmer weather approaches. We're looking at some 50s in the long range forecast, and that's super important there. So where do we go from here? We thought it very important to collect some student level data from our parents. We're going to look at those data in a minute. Obviously, we're looking at some potential additional expansion of in-person learning. And as we mentioned during staffing, we want a model that will we're planning not only for now, but we're planning for September. And in September, we want to make sure that class size is in a good place so that we can open for all students right off the bat and hit the ground running. Certainly I don't think that things like masks are going to go away. I think September we will still have masks in place, but we want to make sure that we're ready to go in September for as normal a school year in 2021, 2022 as can be. So about a week ago, we pushed out a survey to parents. We got a very large response rate, which is excellent, 61%, which is very good when you look at survey research. The responses were also fairly evenly distributed over the grade levels. There was no grade level that responded really significantly higher than any other grade level. It was pretty equal across the board. The one thing that we emphasize that hopefully parents were mindful of, that's in red on the slide, is that bringing students in less than 6 feet may result in more close contacts. It's super important to note that while the CDC has given us some flexibility with that 6 feet, the quarantine rules and guidance has not changed. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples of potential impact as we move forward. We just need to be super mindful of this. So again, we had 988 responses to the survey. We had about 5% or are fully remote. Our responses were families currently on fully remote. About 87% are currently hybrid. We would expect that, and about 8% are in school every day. And those are our students that attend Western Suffolk Boces and have the greatest need, either academically or on a mental health basis. So super important question. We needed to know where parents are in their support of a decrease in physical distancing. Approximately 78% of our parents are okay with that. Bringing desks a little closer together, maybe 3 or 4 feet as opposed to 6 feet. Bus, which is an ongoing challenge for us. We specifically put a question in there about roughly 49%, or about half our parents, are comfortable with students sharing a seat on the bus. We do have about 66 parents who responded, or about 7%, who are not comfortable with that and do not have an alternate way to get their child to school. From an ethical standpoint, that does make me a little uncomfortable. So we do need to keep an eye on that. Many of our children don't currently take the bus, which is over a third, and that's thanks to many of our parents driving this year, and we appreciate that. Okay, so the all-important question: if student density were increased, social and physical distancing reduced from 6 feet to maybe 3 to 4 feet, which instructional model do you choose for your child? To note that in-person every day was highest, very clearly with seniors and 6th graders. About 74% on average of our parents responding were comfortable with in-person every day. We still have about 16% of our parents who would be fine with hybrid, maybe with a little less physical distancing that might be reduced. About 9, almost 10% would be more comfortable with full remote. And that's important because when we initially surveyed parents of their current model, that was about 5%. We do get more families that are now uncomfortable with their child being in school that would now be fully remote. And that gives me reason to pause to think about the implications of that a little bit, and pushing some to choose remote over in person. So where do we go from here? Schools, thank goodness, have largely been a safe place for kids. This is great. Because we've abided by all the guidance and recommendations, when we have had a case in school, we've had relatively small numbers of quarantine students that have been impacted. Many of the cases you'll see at the high school and the middle school, there were no impact at all. simply because those students are spread out and distanced during the school day. In contrast, there are other districts that have already gone under that 6 feet. And what we are hearing, and I spoke to a panel of superintendents over February break, is that they have experienced significantly higher quarantine numbers per positive student. I'm going to show you some examples in a minute, but that is something that's important and should give us pause for thought. So I'll give you a quick example. This is our current model on the left. We're operating under a hybrid model. We have a 6-period block schedule on the middle school and the high school. Because we're practicing 6 feet in most scenarios, we have very few quarantines and school attendance remains relatively predictable for our student population. If we go to a more in-person model, we will need additional information from the bus, from our teachers, from seating charts, from cafeteria supervisors in terms of who was seated where, in terms of potentially being a close contact. Students within 6 feet for 10 minutes or more are identified, and those students, unfortunately, are subject to quarantine. So I put together two examples that I can show real quick. This might be an example of a class of 24 students. 2 of those students, about 10%, might be full remote. So that leaves us with a class of 22. They are cohorted. There might be 10 students in on cohort A on Monday, 12 students in cohort B on Tuesday. We may have a cohort that ends up sitting at this desk right here. But all of these students surrounding that student currently are 6 feet separated from that student. So none of those students in that class would need to quarantine if we did have a COVID positive case in that classroom. If we go to a higher density type seating chart, again, same location, we have COVID-19 in that classroom. We now have 22 students that are in person on any particular day. And now when we do a little bit of measuring, these 4 students are now within 6 feet of that student. Even if we do have barriers or those plastic shields on desks, it's the distance that matters. Those 4 students would likely need to quarantine in this scenario.
And Dr. Egan, to just, if you can go back to that, just to emphasize the point you were making before, so that people really are fully cognizant of this. This is one class, and so you'd have to track the positive case throughout the school day, which could be 5 or 6 different iterations of this seating chart, and result in potentially 20 plus quarantines from one positive, where right now we generally have very few, if any, usually 0 quarantines from an in-school positive. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And just to follow up so that we're not speculating so much, you had mentioned the panel discussion with your superintendent peers and those districts that have been back with higher density. That has been their experience, correct? That 20 is about the number per positive that they end up with quarantines?
That is absolutely correct. There was we had three superintendents on a panel over February break, 2 in Suffolk, 1 in Nassau, and the positive is that they've certainly had more students in school every day. The negative is when there is a positive case in the school, it can result in somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20 quarantines per student. Again, simply because of applying this model every time the students move, whether it's lunch, whether it's on the bus, whether it's in first period, second period, third period, etc.
Right. And so that, I mean, it's just to point out the balancing act between being in person more every day versus, you know, the detriments to that. If we look at, I think if we look at the first 2 quarters in the high school, and that includes September and October when we had very few positives, we had 61 positives in the high school. So if you use that, you're looking at 1,200 quarantines over the course of half the year in a school of about 1,000 kids. So on average, every kid would have gotten quarantined potentially more than once. So it's just important for people to understand, I think, when we talk about more quarantines, what that potentially means.
Absolutely, Mr. Bianco. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, we were really waiting for the infection rate to consistently be on the way down. You know, super important if we're back to where we were in the early fall, where having positive cases is very rare in any of our schools. You know, certainly that's better where, you know, we're reporting 3, 4, 5, as many as 8 or 9 cases on a particular day. You know, those quarantine numbers add up pretty quickly.
Thank you.
The other thing that I want to emphasize is, you know, as we navigate the re-entry for more student process, we want to have some very clear monitoring and trigger points. We want to continue to look at where infection rates are locally. If you look in today's Newsday, you will see an update on Wantagh. Wantagh was already a district that was on this particular slide. Wantagh and Manhasset have had some issues with quarantine since February break. Wantagh High School will be back on full remote tomorrow. Again, they had nine positive cases today. So districts that are looking to bring more students back are, you know, some are struggling, and those are 2 examples of that. If we do need to take some steps backwards, that might include either a return to hybrid instruction, or like Wantagh and Manhasset, maybe a close for a period of time back to full remote. Very important to also mention that when school is closed for in-person instruction, that activities stop as well, sports, clubs, things of that nature. So again, another important thing to take into consideration. Any infection rate of greater than 5% puts us out of that blue zone in the CDC guide. Certainly be a trigger point. The local presence of any COVID-19 variants would be very important, and any local spikes in cases or spreader events in the community. For example, I think in Manhasset, it was a Super Bowl party where approximately 50 students attended. Many came down with COVID, and that was a local spreader event that they had there. I always like to emphasize, it's a favorite quote of the board and myself, it takes a village. Our primary goal remains to keep our schools open for in-person instruction. Every one of us want kids in school as often and consistently as we possibly can. I can't emphasize this enough. You know, this is a shared goal that I think every one of us attending this meeting has. But it's really simple. If we want the best chance of ensuring that expansion continues and is successful, we need to make sure that we continue to make good choices, and that school is a safe haven, but that we continue to make good choices at home and in the community. The most common spread continues to be indoor gatherings and family member spread. So moving forward, we need to stay vigilant in practicing those 4 Ws in school, at home, and in the community. We have a considerable amount of information on COVID-19 that's posted to our district website. If you haven't already done that, look around on there. You'll find a ton of information, and I'll also be posting our presentation from this evening. I wanted to end with what I'm going to call a tale of March 1st. And this is kind of important. If we look at March 1st, 2020, which is now 366 days ago, we had our first confirmed COVID-19 case in Suffolk County. We have had 0 cases in Kings Park in the 11754 area code. We hadn't a single case. Our infection rate was 0. We had 0 deaths. And on a daily basis, I was receiving communications from the community pushing us to close schools due to health and safety concerns for their children. We had parents who were very angry that our schools were still open and that our children were in school. Fast forward to this past Monday, we had 575 confirmed new cases of COVID-19 in the county. We had somewhere between 4 and 5 new cases in the 11754 area code per day. That's been our average over the last 7 days. We had an infection rate in Suffolk County of 4.9%, which is just under that 5% mark in blue. Unfortunately, 10 people died in Suffolk County on Monday. And correspondence from parents are pushing for 5-day-a-week in-person learning. One super important thing at the bottom of this slide that I received from a contact at St. Catherine's. The beds at St. Catherine's are full. None of the patients are over 50 years of age. To end on a positive note, 2020 has washed away. The tide came in, the tide took it away. Things are getting better. The numbers continue to trend down. It's important to remember that this virus will be not permanent. We are going to get back to some semblance of normal shortly. The spring is coming, the days are getting longer, and the days are getting warmer. This too shall pass.
Dr. Egan, thank you very much for that very comprehensive report on COVID-19. I'd like to open this up to the board for any comments or questions that you might have.
I'll bat lead off. There's no question that everybody wants to have more and quality in-class time. I don't think there's anybody that wants the opposite. Fewer distractions with in-class learning, social well-being of the students is enhanced. You're able to monitor mental fitness more carefully. Just the addition of activities being restored is helpful and helpful to the students. And then, but there are problems. And the problems is that right off the bat with full-time school is for, as the numbers students or students that are under our hybrid system right now may have to opt out of full-time learning. So instead of having 2 days a week, they may have to go to 0 because the parents don't want the students in the schools all day, whatever percentage that is. Okay, and I was in a building today with a student teacher, Nassau County. And the left side of the room had been wiped out because one person tested in that class and 5 people tested positive in the building. But the one side of the room had not one student on it because they opted to have everybody come back. So the parents have to make a consideration. The quarantine period could impact students prior to special events or sporting events, as well as end of the year testing. Family members at home are affected by children coming in. In a number of cases, you have grandparents getting their children on and off of buses because those are the only ones home to take them off the bus because of working parents or a working parent in the house. And then the CDC guidelines have really not come down from that 6 foot. The other aspect I'm very concerned with is the others, because as I call them others, and that includes the custodial, security, clerical, administration, obviously the educators, and individually, everybody's lost something along the way. All of us has lost part of a year of our lives. Okay, I can't visit my mother, for example, at certain times. Okay, and she did come down with COVID in the end. And then what we really did want to have everybody come back. March 15th of last year, I remember distinctly, that was a day of Sunday when things closed down for what was supposed to be a 2-week period, and then it ended up never materializing, coming back. But at the same time, though, I think it's necessary to mention that in the last number of years, okay, this is just another area where the schools are directly impacted by societal problems. And this is just my list that I just made up in the last couple of minutes. 2 years ago, if you recall, it was the Parkland shootings and security became the #1 issue. Harassment and bullying, special education, monitoring, just understanding who had difficulties. Smoking in schools. When I first started here, students were allowed to smoke outside. Alcohol use and abuse, sexual education, sexually transmitted diseases, mental health, gender identity, drug use and abuse, health issues such as obesity and anorexia, allergies, whether it be food-borne or chemical-borne, being looked at. You can't bring cupcakes into school anymore. The inclusion of special ed students in the classrooms, sexual predators in the neighborhoods, testing at the state level, which has caused a lot of difficulty for some students, as well as the improved standards for graduation. Many more classes required for students than when I first started here. What strikes me, though, is that 2 years ago, we spoke about security. One of the questions that I asked at our meeting, we had that big meeting in the high school, and one individual in particular kept saying, what are the schools going to do? What are the schools going to do? And my question to the individual was that after school, does your child go to the theater? Does your child go out to a fast food place, each of which the areas where shootings had occurred? And the criteria was different in terms of what this child was allowed to do outside of school, but the schools had to fix the problem. We were asked then. And so I'm very concerned about where we're headed with this, but with the recognition that I'd like to have the kids back in school as soon as possible, as safely as possible. But in addition to the students, though, that has to include the staff, and that includes everybody on through the clerical, secretarial, same thing, I'm sorry, security, and educators. Thank you.
Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Eden, for the presentation. Thank you to the parents who took the time to complete the survey. We strongly look at all those numbers as a board. Like all of you, we are concerned with education of our kids. That's why we sit on this board. We're very proud of our district and what we can do and have done in the past and want to do in the future. Before I got on the board, I was a concerned parent for my child. When I took the position to join the board, I was a concerned community member for the education of our kids, for the education that our district provides. And also to be fiscally conservative with our taxpayers' money. We took that as oaths, I believe, when we joined the board. So it's very easy to advocate for your child. Advocate for all children. We know something. Any plan is not going to be 100% pleasing to everyone. So looking at the survey we asked for, it helps to guide me, I believe, in my way of listening to the community, hearing what their needs are, what they think their needs are for their kids. And they're all different. So it's very hard to come to a decision that you know is not going to please everyone. But our number one concern as a board member, as a district, is to educate our kids. And in-person learning is the best by far. A computer cannot replace a classroom. And we all agree on that. When I see the numbers of, I believe 78 parents, 78% of parents are looking for their kids to go back in school. I respect that. But in making a decision, I know that 22% will not be returning. And again, when you look at how many started as remote and how many will go to remote or return in person, that remote number goes up. So again, I know whatever decision I make isn't going to be pleasing to everyone. So I gave it a lot the weekend. Sports came back a few weeks ago, and just to make a bit of an analogy, we had our boys and girls basketball teams compete in the championship. Had we not taken that risk to bring them back to play, we would have never known how far they could make it. So congratulations to both. So I thought about how our school offers, in keeping with what Dr. Egan brought out with the CDC guidelines, lowest risk, medium risk to highest risk. We supply those in sports for all our kids. You allow, some of you allow your kids to play high risk sports, some of you don't. But we offer medium risk sports and lower risk sports. So I believe in what we're doing and offering a remote, a hybrid, and an in-person. I know it won't cover everyone, because some people may opt to go back to remote. But with the percent of people looking for in-person and my beliefs about education, I believe it's best to get kids back in the in-person environment. However, we as a board, and Dr. Egan can do that, we can't keep them in school. That's where we say the saying, it takes a village. And yes, the spread is not spread in schools, it's spread out of schools. So it's imperative, as Ms. Johnson said, what we do outside of school to should we have to do quarantining because of a positive test, you have to know it's going to be more quarantining of students, possible staff, teachers. It said before, people know I work in another district. Our district came very close to going hard to remote because of the high percent of positive cases at the high school level. So we can move forward. And we asked Dr. Egan for a plan to put together. But it's not us who are going to keep you in school. So I really hope everybody takes it seriously, put education first. We can put the kids back in, you keep them there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. DeFord. Mr. Bianco, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Yeah, thanks, Diane, and echo a lot of the same comments that others have made. First and foremost, thank you to Dr. Egan and his team for putting everything together for the presentation tonight and to gather the data. And thank you to everybody for participating. That's what this forum is about. And I've said from the time I first ran for the board and from prior dealings and in community activities, parents have every right and expectation to advocate for their kids, and what's best for your kid is different than what's best for somebody else's kid. And that's how we get input. That's how we come to consensus. And that's how we move forward. And I never hold anything against anybody for advocating for their kids. But as others have said, ultimately, as a teacher or as a coach, as a coordinator, and in this case for us as board members, we need to look out for the greater good and for all the kids, and for the kids who maybe don't have those advocates or have less vocal advocates. We also have to look out for the district and make sure that we're in addition to what we want to do, we're governed by rules and regulations about what we're allowed to do. And one role of a board member in any organization is protecting that organization, right? Whether it be a school district or any other charitable organization or otherwise that you're involved with, that you make good decisions that are backed up by the rules you need to follow and opinions that you seek to protect and not subject it to an undue risk or liability. So that's a little bit different. We have accountability and responsibility to make sure that we protect the district. Where I struggle, and I want to speak, I want to reiterate what everyone else has said. Kids in school is where they belong. Being in school as much as possible is everyone's goal. Getting back to normal is everyone's goal. But I also sit and reflect on the reasons we all want that, right? Is because being in school is a better learning environment. It's a better mental health environment. The more we can have kids in school, the better. And so as Dr. Egan pointed out in his presentation, and Kevin and Pam both touched on, it concerns me. I struggle with the fact that we will double, based on the responses that we've gotten, that we will double the amount of remote students. And as people ultimately make final decisions, maybe it's a little more, maybe it's a little bit less. But as we sit here and say that being in school is better for all those reasons, knowing that we're going to do that in part by balancing it against another 90 to 100 kids who won't see an adult potentially outside of their home at all, where now they see an adult at least on average 2.5 times a week. And from an equity and an ethical perspective, I do struggle with that. And I know the large majority of people responded that they want their kids in 5 days a week, regardless. But know that there are people out there that are concerned and that they have legitimate concerns, whether it's for health or well-being of family members and their own understanding and feelings about the virus, anxiety level issues with close contacts. I know I was at a funeral last week, and you go to mass on a Sunday and everything's marked out, and the pews were marked out at this funeral. Green and then 2 red rows where you couldn't sit. But for the funeral, there was quite a turnout, and people sat in every pew. And it's there's an anxiety level when we haven't been in those type of situations for a year, and we've been telling people, the authorities and Department of Health have been telling people 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet. You walk into a situation like that, and we need to be mindful of that. If we do make the decision to go ahead and bring kids back more often, not only do we have to look out for those kids that choose full remote, and that we stay in contact and make sure they're receiving contact from the district, and from adults outside the home. Because as I said, I talked to friends of mine in other states, and one of the first questions they both asked me was, how many suicide attempts have you had in your district? It's a real issue, and one is too many. And so we need to be mindful of staying in touch with these students and understanding and respecting people's legitimate concerns. We also have to be prepared that kids coming into more crowded environments are going to have anxiety, and being there to help them through that. Pam, I hear your sports analogy, and as a parent of one of the girls on the basketball team, it was a wonderful weekend. And it was fabulous for them, for the parents, for many in the community, and the support was amazing. I look at it a little bit differently. It's a choice that we made that doesn't necessarily impact others that don't make that choice to participate in high-risk sports. By making the choice to bring back more kids in school and be in a higher risk environment, the only option we're leaving people with to have that lower risk environment is to go full remote. And again, to not have any contact with our teachers in person. So, those are things that I struggle with. I think we need to be mindful of regardless of the decision that we make. And there's ways to alleviate some of those, as I said, making sure that we stay in touch with those kids who will be in school less, making sure that we have tools available to kids that may have anxiety coming back. As the parent of a senior, and I know many people are advocating for seniors to come back first, but I think all of us know that, college applications have been significantly delayed. Responses from colleges have been significantly delayed this year due to the large volume of applications. And your ability to travel and visit schools has been impacted due to restrictions. And so as kids hear from colleges in March and April and have to make a decision by May 1st and want to be in school, and they're going to choose the option to be in school, one of the things I think we need to reevaluate is, we basically told people when they chose full remote or hybrid earlier this year that they were sticking with that model. I think we need to give people control so that if they know they have a college visit or they have a family event or something, that they can't take the risk of getting quarantined, because Suffolk County Department of Health, it will be reported to them, right? And quarantine means quarantine. It doesn't mean just not going to school, right? You're supposed to stay home. So I think giving people that ownership and the ability to be able to flip back and forth between remote and in school is important, so that they can make decisions that may change over the last couple of months of school. So I think those are things that are important as we consider this and what to do, and some of the things that, as I said, I struggle with. If we're able to do it safely, absolutely support getting the kids in school more and doing it on a trial basis. If we do it in a way that's safe, we do it in a way that protects the kids, gives them options, looks after them, and protects the district. And so we will continue to evaluate that. But thank you for taking the time to listen. And again, I just ask people to be respectful of others that may feel different, because the survey did show not only that a large majority of us support sending kids back 5 days a week, but maybe they're not the majority, but there's folks out there that are not comfortable and have legitimate reasons for being less comfortable. And let's be respectful of those, and let's try to accommodate those so that everybody can have a good experience regardless of what it looks like. Thanks, Diane.
Thank you, Joe. So I just want to say that I'm right on board with my fellow board members. I mean, and Dr. Egan. the teachers, the administrators, everybody wants to see the kids back in school 5 days a week. I'm looking at your signs, there's not anything untrue about that. Kids belong in a classroom. They need to be in school. Life has not been normal for a long time, and we have to do everything that we can to get them back in school, but we need to be safe. And that has to be, you know, one of the most important things is looking at it, that health and safety is very important, not just for our students, but for all the staff in all of our buildings. So, you know, I agree with Mr. Bianco that if we do bring kids back 5 days a week, there has to be a mechanism for if there's something important, like visiting a college, that they can go remote to keep themselves safe, to be able to do what they need to do to further their education. To Mrs. DeFord's, well, I guess everyone has said it, it does take a village. We can do our part and try to get everybody back, but we need the community to do their part and make sure that we're all practicing social distancing and safe behavior. I don't want to just go over everything that has been said already. I just want you to understand that I do want the kids back in school, but it is a difficult decision to make because there are people who are not comfortable with it. And I do agree that we could have students that come into school and could be anxious about how close they are to other kids in the classroom and the amount of students in the building. And we have to do everything possible to identify that we're looking after everybody's needs. So I do appreciate everybody's efforts to fill out the survey, and Dr. Egan for presenting it. I think that, you know, we have a lot of information, and I do believe that we will be, well, we are coming back next week with a special Board of Education meeting to present our plans and where we're looking to go as we move forward. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. So we are going to move on to public comments for agenda items only. The Board of Education will hear public comments that address voting items on tonight's agenda only at this time. Speakers must state their first and last names to the district clerk and then address their comments to the board. Comments by any individual may not exceed 3 minutes. A visible timer will be used to monitor this time limit. The public comment sections of this meeting will not exceed 30 minutes in total. In fairness to all speakers, speakers who exceed the 3-minute limit and do not finish when asked will be muted. Due to confidentiality concerns, the board does not permit speakers to raise issues concerning a specific student or a specific personnel matter. Such concerns should be presented to the superintendent after the board meeting. Do we have any public comments that address voting items on tonight's agenda? If you can raise your hand or use your icon.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people on.
Richardson has it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anybody can start.
You guys are together. First page.
Okay, Mr. Richardson.
Okay, this is the regular question and answer, right? When I get to ask you questions?
No, this is for voting items.
Okay, then I'll wait. I'll save my 3 minutes for then.
Okay, thank you. So we didn't see any other hands.
Diane, there's Ruby,
Yeah.
I
Ruby,
believe, has an electronic hand up.
What page?
Our pages might
Got a
be.
question?
Ruby, do you have a question on a voting item?
Page 13, and I didn't see her hand.
The hand seemed to go down.
Okay, all right.
I would have done that.
So next on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the February 9th, 2021 budget workshop and regular meeting. I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the amendment to school resource officers employment agreement. Dr. Eden.
This is one of two items that we discussed in exec session this evening. We are adding bereavement days to this non-aligned individual's contract. We recently did not have any bereavement days in his contract.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board? I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Education approves the attached amendment to the school resource officers employment agreement and gives the board president authorization to sign said amendment. Personnel schedule number 12, Mr. Craig.
Just two brief highlights, just the appointment of two additional head coaches at Kings Park High School for boys soccer and gymnastics. And for our non-instructional staff, the appointment of June Andruscoli, joining our transportation staff as a bus driver. And that's our personnel schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. I'm so glad to see we have a bus driver on the schedule. I have never seen a sign on school district property looking for bus drivers before, so we are really in need of them. I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next is acceptance of recommendation to award bond project proposal for window replacement at San Remo Administration Building. Mr. Craig.
So this is one of three remaining projects with our bond, and this is for a window replacement at San Remo. So it's in the amount of $1,504,400.
Are there any questions from the board? I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Whereas at a special district meeting duly called and held on December 8th, 2015, the district, a majority of the qualified voters present and voting approved the bond proposition authorizing the partial reconstruction and construction of improvements to district buildings and/or sites thereof. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education accepts the recommendation of the district project managers, Park East Construction Corp., to award the bid for window replacement at San Remo Administration Building as listed below. Do I read this? No. Okay, moving on. Authorization to sign agreements for educational technology services. Dr. Partizano.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Nally. These are a series of Ed Law 2D agreements with certain technology companies that we make sure that they enforce all of the data privacy rules, laws, and regulations. All of the agreements have been reviewed by council, and they're here tonight for board approval.
Thank you, Dr. Partizano. Any questions from the board? I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Whereas the Kings Park Central School District has obtained various supplemental data privacy agreements that comply with Ed Law 2D for education technology services to be used in classrooms and in the school district. Whereas the agreements have been reviewed and approved by the school district's legal counsel, and therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education approves and authorizes the President of the Board of Education to sign agreements as listed below. Next is acceptance of recommendation to add verified new vendors to the approved district vendor list. As per district policy, all vendors must be approved by the board before any payment can be made. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Education accepts the recommendation to add verified new vendors to the approved vendor list per the attached documentation. Authorization to sign transfer for the 2020-2021 school year. Mrs. Meehan.
Good evening. This resolution authorizes a budget transfer related to incurred and anticipated costs related to COVID expenses. And this includes those anticipated costs associated with bringing back secondary students 5 days a week.
Thank you, Mrs. Meehan. Any questions from the board? I will make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Education authorizes the attached transfer in the amount of $200,000 to cover incurred and anticipated costs related to COVID as listed below. Acceptance,
She's like, so he just
acceptance of CSE meeting recommendations. Dr. Colby-Rudy.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Nally. The following Committee on Certification minutes presented at today's meeting are from 70 meetings that were held between the dates of January 5th through February 11th.
Thank you, Dr. Colby-Rudy. Any questions from the board? I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Individualized educational programs, IEPs, from January 5th, 2021 to February 11th, 2021, 70 in total. Authorization to sign health services agreement with West Islip UFSD for the 2020-2021 school year. Dr. Colby-Rooney.
Thank you. The agreement presented this evening allows for the provision of health services for students who are parentally placed at St. John's the Baptist High School, located in the West Islip Union Free School District.
Thank you, Dr. Colby-Rooney. Any questions from the board? I'll make the motion to approve.
Second. Go ahead.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Resolved that the Board of Education approves the attached health service agreement with West Islip Union Free School District for the 2020-2021 school year as follows. West Islip UFSD, $14,844.32. And that finishes our voting items. We are up to special reports and announcements from the superintendent.
Okay, good evening again, everybody. Couple of quick announcements. At our next board meeting, we will be honoring our Teachers of the Year. From the high school, Marissa Catalinato, William T. Rogers, Catherine Valente, RJO, Rachel Gallagher, Fort Salonga, Kathleen Cumming, and Parkview, Wendy Hartill. That'll be on March 16th, where we'll do our annual Teacher of the Year celebration, and we're very excited to celebrate these 5 individuals. Thank Dr. Cardesano and his hard work on what was called a SMART grant from the New York State Education Department. It was a grant that 9 districts in our region worked very diligently with Boces on. It's approximately $500,000. It's a multi-year grant, which is geared towards computer science training and PD for our teachers in teaching and the computer science standards. Computer science is here to stay. We've grown it over the last several years, and This is definitely a collaborative step in that direction. So thank you, Dr. Cardesano, for your leadership in that important area. On a very positive note, I highlighted it in my daily communication letter with parents, but in case you didn't get to read it yet, fall sports will have spectators on a limited basis. Check your email. There's a link to section 11. It will be 2 spectators per athlete outside and inside. The only difference is visiting teams will have spectators for away contests outside. There will be no spectators for visiting athletes inside, at least for the fall season. So that will affect volleyball, but our parents will be able to be on the sidelines, both inside and outside, for sports events coming up this fall. It sounds a little weird calling March and April fall, but that will be our fall season. We're in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to make likely going to be some sort of a pass that our athletes will get. They'll each get 2 of them and can give them to 2 people of their wishing. It may be mom and dad, it may be dad and grandma, it may be mom and a girlfriend, but we will have spectators at sporting events. The one thing I do want to add is districts can be more restrictive. We will not be more restrictive, but some may be. So for example, we may have an outdoor away contest where that district may not allow spectators from the visiting team. That is out of our control. We will communicate that with parents so that they are aware. But I did just want to make sure that we mention that in advance. So I mentioned earlier, you know, it's been 366 days of COVID. We are all done. We are all fatigued. We want life to get back to normal. We want our kids in school more. Believe me, we all want kids in school more. I could not agree more with that statement. I'm very encouraged by the decrease in virus cases. We did have a small uptick over the weekend and Monday to 4.9%, but we have generally been on the downturn of the second wave, which is good. More of our employees are being vaccinated every day. More elderly family members are being vaccinated every day. I know in my family, we have not spent time with them for a little over a year. My wife has not seen her mother in a little over a year, who lives in Virginia. All 3 of those individuals have vaccination appointments coming up. And I anticipate that many families in Kings Park are in similar situations, and life will continue to improve.
Oh, wait.
Our behavior of our students and our employees in school has been incredible. Our students have been rock stars. I remember back in August, we were all concerned about mask breaks and how many would there be and how frequently they would be. Our students have been great, and our staff have been great in that respect. And I really want to thank the board for empowering me to now finalize our plan, which we have been working on for quite some time. In case you stepped away from the screen for a few minutes earlier, Mrs. Nally and the board did ask me to come back next Tuesday and present the plan to the community. We'll make sure that we post the time and all the details for that presentation. That will be a special meeting, and it will be focused on our 5-day-a-week return to school plan. Again, The details are very close to being finalized. And will certainly be finalized by next Tuesday. Tune in for that presentation next Tuesday night. And I just wanted to add on a note, just kind of for information, we did have a couple of COVID cases today. A couple more did come in at the end of the 2 cases, unfortunately, that connect with our girls varsity basketball team. In combination, right at the end of the season, we did need to quarantine approximately 19 athletes. And unfortunately, that's going to extend it to the fall season. There will be an update tomorrow on the impact of that. We have been working with families and doing contact tracing all day today. But great news that our girls team won in dramatic fashion with Nicole Bianco hitting the winning jump shot as time expired. On a negative note, you know, again, we did have 2 members of that team that tested positive, and we're in the process of contact tracing that as we speak. And that's my update.
Thank you, Dr. Eden. Anyone else have anything they want to add before we move on to public comments? Okay. So now we're at the portion of the meeting where we will hear public comments. Board of Education will hear additional public comments. Speakers must state their first and last names to the district clerk and then address their comments to the board. Comments by any individual may not exceed 3 minutes. A visible timer will be used to monitor this time limit. The public comment sections of this meeting will not exceed 30 minutes in total.
I gotta speak. Excuse me.
In fairness to all, speakers who exceed the 3-minute limit and do not finish when asked will be muted. Due to confidentiality concerns, the board does not permit speakers to raise issues concerning a specific. Such concerns should be presented to the superintendent after the board meeting. In addition, please note that the board will take no action at tonight's meeting. So again, if you could raise your hand or use your icon. Okay, Mr. Richardson.
First of all, I'd like to start out how disappointed I am with the board and the superintendent. Dr. Egan, man, your presentation today was doom and gloom. It was, if you were a football coach, we would fail before we even got out. We would lose that game before we even got out on that field. Everything was what ifs. What if this happens? What if? You didn't talk about the mental health of the kids, which is worse than anything else. You didn't talk about how kids are failing, or even the straight A kids are getting 85s and stuff. Your whole thing was doom and gloom. What if we move the desk closer? More people are going to be quarantined. It was terrible. It was horrible. It was like a scare tactic to get to scare the parents. You haven't listened to we've been arguing since August on what's the plan to get schools open. We still don't have a plan in writing. Zero, none. We're into March 1st. You're having a meeting March 9th. You keep kicking the can down the block. It's not right. You took a survey that 78% of the parents want to go back to school, and then you turn that survey around and said, well, what about the other 20%? Why take the survey? And out of that survey, how many high school and middle school people? I bet you it was even higher. You know, it's bad. You know, you talked about the CDC, you talked about Cuomo. He said the schools were closed by executive order. When were they open? I know my friend in Belmore, his kids are going 5 days a week since September. My friend in Three Village School, they're 5 days a week. This is high school kids since September. So apparently that executive order was lifted at some time. You didn't want to take parents, you talked about lunch. You talked a lot about the lunchroom. You didn't put any tents up. You started partitions this week inside the school. This is we're into March 2nd. You haven't had a special meeting where you limit us to 3 minutes. You give us 30 minutes on something so important, but you haven't even called the special. Oh, March 9th, you're having a special meeting. You haven't called a special meeting all year. You know, these kids are hurting. They're hurting. They're not learning anything. You are failing the kids. The kids need to be in school. That 6-foot rule, is with masks on, without masks. You can move the kids closer. You can make it work. There's ways around it. You haven't tried. You haven't, everything the parents had asked you to do, you haven't even tried. You had a reopening committee, and I asked you in August, I said, how many people were on that reopening committee were just parents? You know how many? You finally sent me the names. 14 out of 3,100 kids were
Mr. Richardson,
on that.
that was your 3 minutes?
Oh, thank you.
You heard that noise? Thank you.
Let him talk already. He could use my 3 minutes
We appreciate your input.
and mine.
And he can use mine too.
He's got
Enough
my
of
3
this already.
minutes.
He can use my 3 minutes too.
He can
Mike,
use
come
my
on.
3 minutes too.
Mine too.
Let him talk.
Use my minutes too. And mine.
What are you gonna
You
keep
know what?
muting
We heard
all
you
of
for
us
2
so
hours
we
talking.
can't hear?
Dr. Regan, just
Public
retire.
He's the
spokesperson. Let him talk.
He used mine.
Go ahead, Tom. This is a meeting
Jesus.
it's a public meeting of the Kings Park School Board, all right? Public comments are meant for people to come and express their concerns. And Mr. Richardson, we hear your concerns, all right? Yes,
He is speaking for all of us, so he
Not
should
doing
have our
anything
minute.
about his concerns, our concerns.
We had a little rally today.
Excuse me, Mr.
Obviously you heard about.
Mr. Richardson, can I please say something? I saw you were on the meeting during the presentation. Were you able to hear what Dr. Regan presented? That we're going to have a special meeting next week regarding a 5-day week open plan. Just want to make that clarification.
Who's talking
Pam,
to me right
he's not an idiot.
Hold
Let
on.
him
Who's
speak.
talking? Hold on. You asked me a question. Is that Mr. Ford talking to me? Your school district's open 5 days a week. Your plan's already in place.
Bravo.
You work at all 4 school districts. Your plan's already in place. We don't even have a plan yet. We've been asking for this plan since August. We have no plan. You guys are failing us. You're failing the kids. You have no plan. When February, Dr. Regan said, I did listen to him. February 12th, he said the CDC loosened a lot of guidelines. Well, how come February 13th, there was no plan? School sports, which I'm all for, they came out, you had a plan in less than 2 days, I think it was, how everything was going to work. But when it comes to kids in school, you got no plan. That's your job. That's your job. To get these kids in school. Pam Ford, your school district is 5 days a week. Dr. Regan, your kids are in Northport School District 5 days a week, and we don't have a plan. You just keep kicking that can
We just
down the block.
You know what? I'm not going to talk over you.
okay.
We do.
We are going to keep this public comment session civil, all right? We're going to be respectful of one another, and we are going to give everybody a chance to speak.
Being respectful.
Where was anybody disrespectful? He was absolutely respectful. You don't like to hear the
Absolutely.
truth. And it was very easy for you to
Folks,
turn
the
around and
first-
say, I don't want to talk no more. That's exactly what goes on at these meetings. You don't want to.
Whoever, first of all, so obviously we can see Mr. Richardson and his name. We, for our board meetings, just like we as a board, one of the things that we've talked about all year is that we do have rules to follow. The fact that that you don't like our plan doesn't mean we don't have a plan. It just means you may disagree with it. Okay, and we do have rules and guidance that we need to follow to keep the district safe and to keep the district protected. Okay, and we've done more than districts across the country, and we've been very much in parity with districts across Long Island. We've talked about throughout the year, different physical plants result in different instructional models being available. But we're going to follow our rules because we do know that there may be some people out there that want to echo your comments, Mr. Richardson, and that's fine. We welcome them. We also want to be respectful and allow people that may have a different feeling to have time to speak also.
And also too, I just wanted to say that you said that Dr. Egan's presentation was all doom and gloom and talked about the possibilities of additional quarantines. That's a very important thing to think about. You want your kids in school 5 days a week, and we are completely on board with the,
It was doom and gloom.
but you have to be very aware that by doing that, you're putting us.
It was doom and gloom. I work in a hospital. I get it. I take precautions. It was doom and gloom.
We're gonna
Okay,
have to kick him off if he was gonna continue to.
okay.
Is there any?
So Janice Rosenberg, did you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. So I appreciate, the survey results and being mindful of the smaller percentages of parents who are not comfortable with going to the 5 day a week. However, in looking at Northport's plans and Elwood's plans for reopening, because they're bringing back all 6 through 12 over the next few weeks, our survey results were not very dissimilar, yet they're opting to go forward. Interestingly, Elwood specifically says, so they had 71%, which was lower than ours, favored in-person learning, 21% favored hybrid, and 8% favored fully remote. And it says, important note to consider, the administration believes that all 3 models could run simultaneously with success. Has the Kings Park School District thought of implementing all 3 at the same time?
Absolutely did. That's what the choices were on the survey. We are planning a 5 day week option, a hybrid option, and a remote option. We have all 3 options available to parents.
But you have to understand, and that's again talking about quarantine, so people can make educated decisions who maybe don't have as much time as some of the rest of us do to read and understand. That the hybrid model will be different because you'll be in a higher density class. So it's not a hybrid model at 6 feet, it's a hybrid model at less. So
Right, now I understand that. And I know that Northport is going as close as 3.5 feet, the desks, and Elwood is going as close as 3 feet distancing between the desks and 6 feet at lunch, which is when they'd have their masks off. So my next question is, obviously the desk shields are an essential piece of ever bringing our children back, because the school buildings are not going to just magically expand in size, that we're ever going to be able to achieve 6 feet. Where does the district stand in its status of acquiring and installing desk shields for all desks 6 through 12, or acquiring additional desks for repurposed rooms to be used as classrooms? Elwood's reopening plan says that they purchased 1,100 desk shields, 385 additional desks. Where do we stand if the CDC were to come out tomorrow and say, the guidance is now 3 feet, are we ready to go? Do we have the necessary safety equipment in place to go, or are we going to start buying it after are we going to be reactive or proactive?
Mrs. Rosenberg, Dr. Egan.
Thank you.
The answer is we're absolutely ready to go. We've been working on lunch for several weeks. We're fabricating those barriers in-house. They will conform to not only CDC guidelines, but also fire code, which is very, very important. We also are requiring not only, I forget the number that you said for Elwood, our magic number is between 2,800 and 2,900 barriers for desks. So I do anticipate that every one of our student desks on the secondary level will be equipped with a barrier once our plan is ready to roll out.
And what is the estimated time frame of when that is rolling out?
I will share that with you next
On Tuesday
night.
Okay. No, I mean, I appreciate, I try very hard to separate the fact from the emotion.
But
I think we all know.
The plan does very much involve desk shields.
Okay.
I can tell you that the desk shields do not limit quarantine. What the desk shields do is they allow you to go under 6 feet.
Yep.
And
Yeah, and I think-
stay compliant in that.
I think to speak to Mr. Richardson's point, it was that, I think you have to take into consideration that the increase in quarantine, but I think we all appreciate that in-person learning is the best, and to withhold the best possible education for our children because of the hypothetical of how many kids may have to be quarantined is somewhat unfair to the majority of the community. That's what he was saying about the
Understood.
hypothetical. You have to consider it, but I don't think you can withhold, the best possible education from the majority of the community because of a hypothetical. That's really not fair.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mrs. Rosenberg.
Ed Savage.
Good evening, I'm Ed Savage. I want to start off with item 1110. The board has the full authority to carry out the will of the people of the district in education matters. From the beginning, 3/4 of this district has stated they wanted to go in person full time. So what did the district do? We started a reopening committee with 74% of that committee was employed by the school district or was a Board of Education member. Then you misrepresented the DOH, the Department of Health guidance. You told us social distancing was all that matters, but now in fact, as we know, page 2 of the Department of Health guidance notes or use of appropriate physical barriers.
Yes.
For the first time, we've heard this during this meeting where that's been in the Department of Health guidance back since July. You also ignored Department of Health guidance. They also say you could meet your 6 feet distance by expanding your physical footprint or changing the way you utilize space. They give you examples. Classrooms for lunch, page 29. Page 50, cafeteria, gym, auditorium, and libraries as classrooms. Page 51, tents as classrooms. Certainly could be done September through November, April through June. What did the district do? The state even said we'll take it on an expedited basis. Did the district make any request of the state? No, none. I made a FOIL request. You didn't ask for any of those things. What else? Trailers, that was also in there. That was brought up back at a meeting in September. Enterprising people called the next day to the Smithtown Department of Buildings. In 10 minutes, they found out Smithtown doesn't require permits from the school district. In fact, paragraph 12 of the New Beginnings lease, signed in February 2019 by a board member in that room, acknowledges the land and the buildings are not required to comply with town of Smithtown regulations. You knew about it, you either don't know what you signed or you were not honest with us at that meeting. We have all these school districts around us that have been back since September. Hauppauge, similarly sized. Massapequa, not similarly sized at all, much greater, has been back since November. Smithtown and Northport are coming. We asked the board at meetings this year, why? Why not us? Why could all these districts do it? First, we hear the superintendent likens it to COVID with over a 99.5% survival rate. People were vaporized at their desk. And you liken this to 9/11? Then we get Orwellian doublespeak at another meeting. We're told 5-day in-person education is a want, not a need. What type of educator says that? And then we cannot help but see conflicts of interest on this board. We have 2 members who ultimately don't have the ultimate skin in the game because they don't have any children in this district. 3 have direct ties to the teachers union, at least, either had previously worked in the district, work in a neighboring district, or son works for the district. And I do know if you search around a little, many of them are endorsed by the teachers union. So I wonder, are the kids really coming first here? So I ask you, are we going to hear a plan next Tuesday, or are we going to just continue to kick the can down the road for 5 days a week?
Mr. Savage, you will hear a plan next Tuesday. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cynthia Brimley.
Hi, good evening. I know that you've been listening to me advocate for all children, not just my own children, since March, asking for more connection to the school, for asking for, I was one of the first people to bring up that remote learning was something that the community would want. But I do have a question for the board because, as you know, I have a lot of questions, and at the last board meeting, it was mentioned that this time is not really for back and forth questions with the board, and that the letter would be the best way to reach out to the board. So I did reach out to the board more than a week ago with a letter. I have asked for a response. I didn't get a response. So, I mean, I have been advocating at the state level, at the local level. I have contacted every board of, every elected official that is for my address. So I just want to know, if the board doesn't respond, what is the next step? And also at the last board meeting, it was mentioned that there would be a part of the website that mentioned questions back and forth with the board. And I want to know where that important resource is for the community.
Mrs. Grimley, none of us received an email from you. What email address did you use?
Same email I've been using for years. I sent it. I'll resend it right now. But I did email everybody.
The school district email or private email? Mrs. Grimley, is it our private emails or the school district email?
The emails that are on the website, they're private emails. But I will resend. It looks it's in my outbox, but I will resend.
Thank
you.
Also to Mrs. Capabianco, set up an email address for the board. which you could send
No,
out.
it's in your right back.
Or you-
Where is that published?
That one, it's not published yet. It was just set up. You can actually send an email directly to Mrs. Capabianco and she will get it to all of us. So we're sure we'll get it. All right.
Okay, so that's where the email is. So where are the question and answer for the board that was brought up at the last meeting? You said it would be on the website?
Try to remember, who did we have comment at the last meeting?
I believe we only had one question and it was answered. Was there something in particular that you were looking for, Mrs. Grimley?
No, I mean, I have a lot, as usual, I have a lot of questions. I know I have 3 minutes and I don't want to be a community member that's muted. So I have a lot of questions because a couple weeks ago we had a presentation about sports and it was a very quick PowerPoint presentation put together a couple days after the sports, were allowed. And I didn't hear any OSHA regulations or numbers in the hospital. I didn't get any of those details for sports, right? And then it's, as a parent, you see pictures from Kings Park Athletic Twitter account or from the Smithtown News, kids' faces head to head on a wrestling mat, which is fine. I'm happy for the kids that are able to play sports, but it just makes me as a parent wonder, my daughters can't go to school with my neighbors because their last name begins with an S and my last name is with a G. And I do have there goes my buzzer, but I also have questions about the arts. Where are the arts in this piece? There wasn't a winter concert, right? It's just not fair that one group of kids gets singled out and they get what they have been looking for their senior year, their freshman year, whatever, and another group of kids haven't. And there were quite a few questions in my email, but I will send it. I will send it to Patty, because again, I really don't want to be muted.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Grimley. And we've said it before, one thing, we are proud of the fact that unlike many other districts, we have run all of our clubs and activities. And one of the differences with sports, and again, you all know my kids have always been very involved, is Suffolk County Department of Health gave us guidelines and they gave us a way to do it. They gave us direction. When you speak to the other elected officials and state officials and county officials, they have not done that clearly on some of the return to school issues. And it leaves us in quite frankly, a difficult place. Because we do have to, again, keep in mind the interest of all the kids and the interests of the district to protect the district as board members. That's part of what our responsibility is.
Next, we have Kate Mahalik.
Hi, I just have 2 questions. I don't know if you'll have the answer to this, but of the students that have been required to quarantine because of close contact in school, how many have contracted the virus because of that close contact? Is there a percentage or is there a number that you can share that, are these quarantines actually beneficial?
Great question. There is no data on that is current.
Well, wouldn't it be school data? data that you, I mean,
collected.
because you know,
The
if,
quarantines, the quarantines are required by Suffolk County Department of Health regulations, and we have diligently followed their guidance.
right, I understand that. I'm just, you know, I feel like maybe, you know, it's a CDC issue, but, or Suffolk County issue, but I'm just curious, you know, maybe if all the school districts start collecting that information and saying, you know, we're making, you know, 5 kids, 6 kids quarantine every time someone tests positive, but none of those students are testing positive within that quarantine period, you know, it's kind of makes sense that maybe they don't really need to, or maybe it's a shorter quarantine with, you know, 4-day, like they are doing now, 4-day quarantines with a test at the end, something different, you know, where if we had that information and a lot of the districts were collecting it, it doesn't seem like it would be information that would be too hard to track. Am I incorrect? I don't know.
Ms. Mahalik, I think if you go back to the letter that we read at a board meeting a couple of meetings ago, that's exactly what we asked the state and elected officials and the Department of Health to do, right? Was to base it on science and give us updated guidance so that if it's safe to go back at 3 feet, right, where, you know, what studies have been done and have the scientists and the doctors make those decisions and give us.
But I think if we went with our actual kind of science, you know, like our numbers saying we've had this many positive cases, and out of those positive cases, you know, it hasn't, I don't know, maybe there are a lot of people that are testing positive from the close contact in school. But if not, if we could go with those numbers to the state or the county and say, it's really, you know, we're doing this and it's not really needed.
Yeah, I do think you make a very good point. The state did just release new quarantine guidelines for individuals who have been vaccinated. So that's the first update that we have received in quite some time since they reduced the quarantine from 14 days to 10 days. But you do make a very good point, and I thank you for your input on that topic.
And just, Dr. Egan, I would just add though, our own data is very limited because we've had very few quarantines from in school because of our setup. Because of the fact that we've been 6 feet, we've had very few school-based quarantines in the secondary schools. So the data is very limited. So it would need to be more regional to really tell us anything, I believe.
So for the most part, anybody that gets quarantined from school because of the 6 feet rule is more because of lunch or something. It wouldn't be because of the classroom setting. Is that what you mean?
It's mostly because of out of school contact.
Right, but there are certain students that have been quarantined because of school contact, correct?
Very few. Very few at the secondary level.
Okay.
Yeah, but all those at the primary level, at the elementary school level, you can look at that data.
Excuse me, we have people who have had their hand up. Mrs. Mahalik, if we have not answered all your questions, you can send us an email and we can address this further.
Sure, thank you. Thank you.
Councilwoman Inzarella.
Hi, Dr. Egan. Hi, board. Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say, as an elected official, Joe, I'm here to speak about my kids and about the amount of calls that come into town hall. There's always a confusion, and I think Rudy Massimo is on here somewhere, and he knows that confusion. Sometimes people call the school for town issues, and sometimes the people call the town for school issues. So we are inundated with phone calls of our constituents, which I can tell most of the people I know. So how are you? Mike, Gina, Judy, Denise, Marion, Mr. Richardson, how are you? I know them all, and I know how they feel. Everybody wants to go live, 5 days live. And my two kids are at Kings Park High School, and it's affecting them greatly. And we're just done with it. So we are constantly redirecting these phone calls in town hall to the superintendent's office and to the schools. But I really feel for these parents, and it breaks my heart when I have to hear their voices break the way mine's about to break. We need to go 5 days. As an elected official, Joe, that's what I'm saying.
Thank you, Councilwoman. It would be helpful if Department of Health and the state put that in writing, an effective way for us to execute. We'd be happy to, and we're going to do what we can.
Do it. You just got to do it. You know what I'm saying? Just got to do it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maywood? Maynard? Mrs. Maynard?
Yes, hi, how are you?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, if you could just state your first name, please.
My name is Layla Maynard.
Thank you.
I suppose I have a two-part question. The first being, while I appreciate the survey, I'm just a little bit confused as to why there isn't change if the statistics were what they were, and that it's nearly 80% of the parents that would like their children to go back. So my question is, what percentage would actually make that change happen? Because it seems to me like it was just something that you threw out there to kind of throw us a bone, but yet nothing was really going to happen with the outcome of it. So what percentage would that have needed to be in order for there to be change? Would 95% make it? But where is the line there?
Question. Okay.
So the data from the survey are very compelling and very telling. We had heard diligently from the same group of parents since the beginning of the school year. What the survey shows us is that that desire is greater than just the 25 or some odd parents that have been reaching out to us very diligently and repeatedly. The individual student data is important because I need to know what the model actually looks like on the classroom level. One of the things that is not so obvious is the individual space constraints that.
But then why even have the survey to begin with?
One of the superintendents that was on the panel discussion that we had over February break is the 3 Village superintendent. And their high school can fit 2,500 students. And it's currently operating 5 days a week with all students in with 1,300 students. If I had that kind of space, we would already be back in 5 days a week and we would have no issues. The survey.
So really, there was no need for the survey then.
So the survey is super important in that it shows the scope of the parent want. It gives us individual student data, but now we can speak to the actual plan, which is based on actual data and knowing that we can fit students in various places in the building. And that
didn't answer the question yet.
That was super important for us.
So, but I just feel like I'm missing something. So it seems like you knew that, there's only X amount of space. So even if it was 100% of the parents that said, yes, there's still no plan. So it seems like it was just an unnecessary.
Being finalized, and we are going to present it next week at the special meeting.
Next week.
Yes, on March 9th. Okay.
Thank you.
Next is Heather Speciale.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm pretty good, thank you. First, just a quick comment to make sure we're clear and factual. The ICU is in fact not full at St. Catherine's. I know because I've been up there all day. The fact that the patient's ages are under 50 is completely irrelevant to what we're discussing. So let's just make sure we know that. The ICU is not full at St. Catherine. Mr. Bianco, I'm so happy that your daughter is able to play her sport. That's great. That's really good. Your comments that you were willing to take that risk at a high-risk sport is fabulous for you. It's a little condescending that you're going to tell us that you're able to take that risk and make those decisions, but we're not about school. So, you know, maybe back off on that kind of stuff a little bit. Unbelievable. You also said that 61 cases we've had this year. I'm curious if you guys paid attention to how much H1N1 we had during the same time of the year when H1N1, which was much more problematic for children. Do we know what those numbers are? No? Okay, because that spread like rapid fire and really hurt kids. I don't remember doing all this for that. So I'm curious that you just came up with an email. I mean, I've been busy working with COVID patients through this entire epidemic. So, you know, a little busy to get on all your board meetings. So I'm happy to see now that we're at this point thinking about a plan. So I'm kind of shocked that we don't have a special email. As Ms. Grimley has been trying to email everybody separately, we just came up with one centralized place to send the information. Congratulations, that's great. So hopefully she can get her questions to the right spot so it can all be addressed at the meeting instead of the next meeting. So I'm just wondering, really, why Mr. Bianco gets to make his choices for his children, but we can't make our choices. Our kids that aren't in sports, but maybe are more in AP classes or more academic. Bingo. Why don't we get to make those choices? Hello?
Okay,
My point, Mrs. Speciale, is just that
Yes, I'd love to hear your point.
we have, you're not going to agree with it regardless of what I say.
Probably not, but I still want to hear it.
So, but my point was that we have more than 20% of the people who are not comfortable. We do need to at least consider the impact on them and increasing class density.
Okay, hold on, because that wasn't my question. That wasn't my question. You went on and on for a very lengthy time about the 10% of people who are not comfortable to come back. Yeah, I know we have to take them into consideration, but there's also the majority from the beginning, okay? I've studied all the numbers too. My address to you was, why is it okay for you to make your decision about your daughter's basketball team to take a high-risk sport on, which is great. I want all those kids to be able to do that. But you can't take the 73% of people who said they were comfortable going back to class to learn. We can't make that decision.
Thank you for finishing your comment, Mrs. Speciale.
Yeah, so if we could just stick to what I asked instead of going back to being comfortable with all the people who didn't want to go. That's all. I just want to stick to the point.
My point again was we have guidance from the state in both areas, and that's what we're endeavoring to follow. And that in my view, there's an impact on those other kids, and we need to at least consider that. We have to look those kids in the face too and tell them that they're not going to school at all. And that's tough. It's not what we want to do.
No, I'm wondering why I'm muted now though, but it is tough. It is. But again, the question is not that.
we're going to move on to Christine Salva.
Let her speak. Let her speak and answer the question.
Yeah, why can't we get straight answers?
Why do you keep muting me? Why do you keep muting me?
We can't even understand what you're saying when you're all talking at one time.
Why?
Okay. Mrs. Salva.
Okay, can I speak now? I guess. Okay, so I have had regular emails with Dr. Egan and Mrs. Moreno.
Mrs. Salva? We're not.
Yes, this is Christine Salva.
We can't.
And I have included on emails the board as well, so I want to piggyback on Mrs. Grimley's comment, because I have never gotten a response from Mr. Bianco or Mrs. Nelly in response to the email that I sent as well. I've gotten one from Dr. Egan, and then we probably talk at least every other week. Same thing with Mrs. Moreno. My question is, we're now halfway through.
We can't understand what you're saying. I don't know what's wrong.
Okay, so my question is, we're halfway through the third.
Turn it off your camera to talk.
And now we're coming up the plan, which is next Tuesday. So are we gonna have dates next Tuesday as to when each grade is returning? Or it's gonna just be a plan and then the following week, maybe we'll get dates? When are we gonna have dates of when kids are returning to school?
Mrs. Sauer, you'll get all the information next week on March.
I don't know. Including dates.
Okay, I'll send you an email. Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
No,
Are you able to hear me or no?
you're echoing.
You're echoing loud.
It's too loud.
You will have dates next Tuesday, Mrs. Salva.
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me better now.
Yes, did
You will have dates next Tuesday.
Okay, so there will be a date released next week as to each grade and when they will be returning?
Yes, that's what I said 4 times.
Okay, well, just like you couldn't hear me, I couldn't hear you for a second.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And Mrs. Nelly and Mr. Bianco, I want to let you know, I included you on emails also and never got responses, like Mrs. Grimley said. And that was mentioned at the last board meeting to include you on emails, and no responses have been ever sent back.
Did you get a response from Dr. Egan?
I did, and I one from Mrs. Moreno, but I would think that everyone I emailed that to, I would get a response from. I just think that that's, you know, a little bit courteous to respond to an email that's sent.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry that you didn't get a response, and we will certainly address that. Okay. So I think at this point we have reached our 30-minute mark. If I will make a motion for another 30
Something
minutes.
this important, you're not gonna let everybody speak?
Mr. Richardson, we think we are. Let Mrs. Nally finish. Diane, I can't hear you though. You just speak up a little bit.
Certainly. I'd like to make a motion to extend public comments for 30 minutes, for an
Second.
additional 30 minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We can have a conversation and not a yelling match.
Right. We do ask that everybody is respectful. I mean, we want to hear what you have to say, but we certainly want people to be respectful, please. Susan Wolf. Okay, Susan Wolf, please.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for extending the time for my question, because I always seem to be next and then the meeting's ended, so I really appreciate it. This was getting frustrated. I have an 8th grader and a junior. I was fortunate enough to have my junior be accepted into full day, full day, it's not like kindergarten, 5-day a week last week, but my 8th grader is still hybrid. And my question is that everything I've been hearing, and I don't know if it's gossip, but then seeing it on the survey, I keep hearing bringing like the 6th and the 12th graders, 6th and the 12th graders. Is it the plan to bring all kids back? Because especially like the juniors who are getting ready to go, getting ready for college, they need to really have their head in the game. The 8th graders are prepping for high school and the workload is intense. Not even just my 8th grader's not in accelerated. She's in general classes, and the workload is huge and it's overwhelming and it's emotional every night, and information is not getting through all the time when they're home. So I guess my question in my babble is it a plan to bring them all back, or is it just the 2 specific grades that I keep hearing about?
So 6th and 12th grade were the classes where there were the most response to get the children back. That's the only reason why you heard those grades. Our plan is to try to get everyone back to school. So, you know, we understand that all children need to be in school. We're not opposed to that. So we have been working on a plan, and on Tuesday, the 9th, it will be rolled out and all the specifics will be given to you.
Okay, I really hope it's all grades considered, because
everything, yes.
Okay, because I may just lose my mind, so just.
It will, like many other districts have done, Mrs. Wolf, it will be phased in.
Okay.
And will likely include 6th and 12th grade first. But I do anticipate bringing forward a plan where all grade levels will be in 5 days a week.
So you're anticipating bringing that plan, but does that mean you don't have one for those grades yet?
We have a plan and it will be rolled out next Tuesday.
Period.
Okay, so all the information will be given out next Tuesday.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Erica Lemieux.
Hi, looking forward to next Tuesday's meeting. I have a 6th grader and are eagerly looking forward to him going back full-time, 5 days a week. My question is to Mr. Bianco. I had emailed the Board of Ed last week through their personal email addresses, because that's the only email addresses that are listed anywhere on the website. And he did respond to me. It was regarding an agenda item, which he was not willing to add to the agenda because it was regarding a personal student. I had then emailed back asking for an agenda item to be added in general terms, and I've not gotten a response back from the board from that. I'm just wondering if you received my email and if I can expect a response back from that.
I did receive your email. Thank you for acknowledging the fact that we did respond to your first email. I think we will reconsider it. We need to talk as a board. But my expectation, unfortunately, is the response will likely be the same. And for everybody's benefit, it involved the ability to add additional athletic opportunities, which is we do get requests from time to time for a lot of different sports. And unfortunately, we would like to accommodate every kid with every interest, and unfortunately, we're not always able to. But we will discuss that further as a board and see if it's something that we can consider. But unfortunately, it's not likely that it will happen. We're just really excited that that we have the ability. It's around swimming, that we have the ability for kids to compete for Kings Park as individuals and have an outlet that some other sports do not have.
I understand that. I'm grateful for at least that, but I did make it clear in my second email to you that my request for the agenda item was different than my original request for the past 6 months, and that it was more of just a different request. So if you could read my email, and
I have, and we will discuss it as a board, and I'll discuss it with my fellow board members again and get back to you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Carrie. If you could please state your first and last name.
Hi, my name is Chris Ingerson. I have two students. My question is, and that's part statement, part question. One of the things that's come up and we've heard over again from the board is density size, classroom density. Another thing that we've heard since August was the size of the classroom is limited. And I think a couple of the other gentlemen kind of raised this point and didn't necessarily say it in a question. We obviously have identified the problem is space. What is the answer to the problem? In other words, you can't make the classrooms grow. As many times as Dr. Egan measures, his tape measure is going to come out with the same size classroom. Trailers can be put in a day. A couple weeks in a school year is a large amount of time for a finite period. The school year runs from August, basically September, to June. A couple weeks as you delay your answers and give us the politically correct answers instead of solving the problems is detrimental to our kids. So my question is, what is the answer to getting more space?
So the answer is that we from the CDC, and the language is different, which opens up to different interpretation. And this is where a lot of schools have decided that they're going to go with the 6 feet or more, or whatever is possible, or what is most possible, and use the barriers so that we can bring more children back to school with less space, less social distancing space, okay? Back in August, when we had to submit our plan to open up our schools, Dr. Egan had to sign, I think it was 90 something, what are they called? Attestations?
Correct.
Stating that we were going to abide by all of these regulations. When we opened up in August, everything was 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet. It was very clear what we needed to do in order to put children in school. As time went on, additional information was given out. There is nothing that is as concrete as it was in August. There's a lot of information out there that is subject to interpretation. So now we have looked at things and we are getting barriers for the desks, and we are going to bring children back at less than 6 feet. That's what's changed. We have all along wanted our children in school. We understand how important it is for the children to be in the building. This has nothing to do with teachers not wanting kids in school. Our teachers have been right on asked them to do. Our staff has been phenomenal. Our teachers, our custodians, our clericals. Excuse me?
With all due respect, I didn't say anything about teachers not wanting kids in school. I'm just saying you identified the problem as having enough space and you really didn't come up with a solution. That's it. You know, a solution. And when you sit there and say it's open to interpretation and guidelines, and you just said more information has come out. Well, more information has come out from August to March. It's a 6-month window almost. So why is the progression for our school district so slow?
I believe that the additional information that we have received came out in August. I mean, in February.
Yeah.
And we have been looking at ways to bring children to school, back to school 5 days a week, all school year.
But that's what we've been hearing every meeting. That's what we've been hearing every meeting. You want the kids to come to school, but you're not proposing the solution. Right now, you have the elementary kids in school 5 days a week. My kids in the elementary school. I feel for these parents. I feel for these parents that have their kids home when they should be having that social interaction. So therefore,
We agree with you 100% and on.
so you agree with me,
Have a
if you agree with me and the school district is currently running 5 days a week for the elementary, why is it not trying to find the space for the older kids?
We are, and the plan will be presented on Tuesday, the 9th.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Anthony Inzerillo.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Anthony Inzerillo. I've been a part of the Kings Park School District for just over 18 years. My son graduated Kings Park High School just over 10 years ago, and I have 2 daughters that are currently in the Kings Park High School. In talking to my neighbors, it's just concerning that a bunch of them have resorted to going to other school districts and even to private, Catholic schools in order to get their children in 5 days a week. And I know for a lot of parents on this call and even for a lot of people in the community, that's going to be a very serious consideration if we don't get our children back in school 5 days a week in September. And I know that these are challenging times, and I know that these are really difficult, decisions for all of us to be able to make. But as a parent, I know what's in the best interest, of my children. What's in the best interest for them is to be in school 5 days a week. And I'm just wondering if the board considered how the vaccine is going to impact, our community and will impact, this decision to bring our children back 5 days a week. And also if any research perhaps has been done with looking at air purifiers that may help, cleanse, the air in the classrooms to, help protect, our students and staff members, so that if we do have to move students from 6 feet to 3 feet, maybe that's an added layer of protection and security that, we can have in place for our children and staff members as well. And then I know Dr. Egan spoke a little bit about talking to the Department of Health. And I was just wondering, what was mentioned with the Department of Health that can possibly bring our students back 5 days a week that perhaps wasn't mentioned, yet tonight. And then just lastly, I just want to thank the board and thank Dr. Egan and his team for their hard work and for really making sure that we do achieve the goal of making sure that we bring our children home, and let's bring our children back into school 5 days a week. You have our support. You have the support of the community. We're ready to roll our sleeves up and do whatever it takes to get that done. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Inzerillo. Next, Kathy.
Hi, I'm Kathy Murray. How are you? Sorry about that. I guess I should start the video. Sorry, I apologize. I have a question. I did fill out the survey, and I do want my daughter, who's a senior in high school, back 5 days a week. But one of the questions on the survey really bothered me. Are you planning on bringing them back 5 days a week and still splitting the cohorts up so that half of the classes are working remotely?
No. 5 days. Yes. Dr. Egan will answer that.
The cohort model, sorry, disregard that. The cohort model will largely be out the window.
Okay.
So one of the things we do need to look at is we have done a lot of work on class size over the years, but we do have a limited number of classes that approach 30. And that we're trying to move those classes around the building to different rooms that can accommodate more students. That just makes sense. We hope we don't need to have students in a different location, live streaming into a classroom, still in school. I know some districts have done that with some of their larger classes. The students are in the building, which is great, but they might not necessarily be in front of the teacher that's teaching them. We're hoping to not have to use that very often, if at all.
I'm sorry, I lost
the
part
cohort
of you. It
model
was
will
like
essentially
a
be-
glitch. I'm sorry, Dr. Egan.
That's okay.
You like froze for a bit. So I missed a part of what you were saying.
That's okay. We're hoping that all of the students will be in the classroom in front of the teacher. But we may have difficulty with a couple of large classes with that scenario. We're going to try to avoid that, but essentially cohorting will be no longer in existence. But please know that if you look at the CDC guidance, that's a higher risk activity. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It just means we need to be mindful that that is a higher risk scenario. But most likely a very real scenario that we're going to have very soon in all grade levels, because our student density is going to increase in our classrooms.
No, I totally get it, because with my company, we've been working, through COVID, because we're considered essential. And, we've had 22 COVID cases, with 800 employees, working, full time. So, it can be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left on our comment session. So I just want to be clear that on Tuesday the 9th, the plan will be rolled out for grades 6 through 12. It's definitely happening. The plan will be presented. So if you have a question that is not asking us if we're bringing the kids back, I think Courtney's iPhone is next. Courtney, we need your first and last name, please.
Hi, I'm Courtney Haggerty. I just wanted to know if we had to have a very quick regression plan for worsening COVID, why didn't we have a plan in place to be able to put a 5-day-a-week plan back in place as the numbers continue to drop? So a plan or a meeting is being held for March 9th. However, by the time we get this rolling, we'll probably be after spring break, leaving the kids really only 2 full months left at school. Like, we should have been able to roll the same way we would have been able to regress just as fast.
So, great question, Courtney. The short answer is we knew the CDC was going to be coming out with updated guidance. We didn't know what that guidance was going to look like, but we had to digest it and then act. And the largest act is going to be installing barriers on desks, which is going to take time. I can't do that over a night. It's approximately 28 or 2,900 barriers in classrooms on 7 grade levels. So, that needed to be carefully thought out on a student level basis in terms of the number of kids that are going to be in each classroom. It's a bit of a complicated puzzle, and it took us some time to digest that. But we very much have a plan, and I'm looking forward to presenting it next Tuesday night.
Okay, thank you.
Our next. Okay. Our next speaker is Clayton Cobb.
A student, Stephen Torrey, wants to speak also.
Clayton.
Okay, you can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I could probably take 30 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep this concise and not emotional, because it's hard to do. Sorry, I know you guys have to go through a lot with that, but this is important to all of us. I have a couple of main topics I want to talk about. First is, I've heard Dr. Egan, of course, always say, and then Joe said tonight, you want to follow the science. And that's what I'm interested in, because that's what I do, is data analysis. And I'm very much into the figures. And I just want to raise a couple of points that were made tonight. And there were many actually that I could refute or overturn. But my main issue is, if we're going to follow the science and we're going to act as if we're following what is happening in the world and in the country and the state, then that has to be accurate data, accurate information. So I can't go through all the topics because it would take too long, but I just want to mention that there should be some reason to doubt some of the things we're hearing. But I want everybody not to doubt. Like, I want us to all make sure we're using the right data. And a couple of points I'll make is one, Heather already mentioned, like the comment about St. Catherine's ICU being full and nobody under, over 50. I mean, I checked the data right after Dr. Egan said that. I'm not at the hospital. I actually have the data. I mean, I can literally go get it from the HHS right now. And there's only been 22 people under the age of 50 admitted for COVID in the last 14 weeks. And right now they have 5 beds open and there's only 6 people in there for COVID. So it's kind of like that. If we're going to be trying to use data to make our points, it's got to be accurate. And anytime that you give something not accurate, that puts everything else into question. The second point that was made that's very important is Dr. Egan was talking about how the CDC came out with these blue, yellow, orange, red zones that have different thresholds, like with positivity. And we're, sometimes a little bit below 5%, sometimes a little bit above. But I don't know, Dr. Egan, if you didn't know this or it didn't matter to us, but the CDC doesn't just use positivity, right? It shows cases per 100,000. And the guideline says you should use the higher of the two. So if you're in orange for cases and blue for positivity, guess what? You're orange or red. And in our case, we're deep into the red. And if you followed the CDC guidelines for what they just put out, we would have everything virtual and no sports. And we wouldn't have anything open the rest of this year because it's virtually impossible to reach the numbers to get to orange and yellow. Now, I don't want that to happen. I consider us ready for school right now because those guidelines are ridiculous. But it's important to know that if we're going to follow certain guidelines and use those as the stick for why we can and can't do things, it has to be accurate. And I'd like to offer my services to help with that because I know this data and I use it every day. And I work with a team of people that does it all day, every day. So just wanted to say those 2 points were way off base. Okay, now going back to what matters for us here with our kids. So
If
I
you
just
could
want to make
just
sure
wrap
everyone,
up, Clayton.
yeah. What was that?
If you could just wrap up, that was 3 minutes.
Sorry, then I tried to be quick and I didn't. Anyway, just want to make sure everybody knows that 99.84% of the students in the state of Florida have access to full-time in-person school, and they have the option to opt out if they want to, so they can do either one. And so there's no reason it can't be done. Florida has way better numbers across the board than we do in every metric whatsoever. And their unemployment is better and their median age is higher. So, I mean, frankly, there's really no excuse other than our DOH not giving us good guidance. But do we have to follow it? Or is it mandates like by law? Or do we get to go with what the national data says and what the global data says? I'd rather do the latter so we can get our kids in school because it is safe and it is appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Michelle Torrey.
Hi, everyone. I'm not Michelle Torrey. That's my mom. My name is Stephen Torrey. I'm a senior at Kings Park High School. And I hate to continue addressing a point that I think has been made a couple times, but I also feel like it really hasn't been well addressed by the board. So I would hope to hear some kind of a response regarding the point has been made that certain programs, in particular athletics, have been given a lot more support in terms of being able to return and a lot more. It was a much more efficient plan. As soon as Section 11 gave us the go ahead, that there was right away a plan in place for sports to be able to return. But other programs such as music, robotics, honor societies haven't been given that same leeway. And like, for example, the point was made a little bit ago that we're very proud that we're having all of our clubs still fully functioning. But in past years, like for just to give one example, the High School Musical has had several dozen students participating. This year it only has 15. It's virtual, and it's honestly, I think it's not really fair to say that all clubs and all activities are being allowed to participate to the same extent, because across the board it's just really not the same. So I feel, and I think a lot of other community members feel, that there's not a lot of equity. There's a pretty significant disparity in the way that certain programs are being treated. And I think we're all hoping that going forward with whatever the plan is, that hopefully we'll see more of in equal treatment and prioritization of programs, in particular the arts. And you know, I'm a 3-season athlete myself. I have been throughout high school, so I understand the significance of sports. I understand why that's important for the community, but I also think that there are a lot of other activities that just haven't been as high of a priority. So.
Okay, Stephen, thank you. Thank you so much for expressing your concerns, and they are valid concerns.
Thank you, Stephen. And we understand, while some of the clubs may be running, they're not the same. We do understand that.
So the next person is Grace. Grace, are you there? Okay. We'll move on to Denise.
Hi, how are you? Denise DeJenna. My question to you is, since this whole thing started in March, why are you now only getting barriers? I don't understand that. All other schools, every other school around has barriers since last year. Why now are you only doing it? So now you're pushing it off for so much longer. And that's my first question. My other, what I have to say is, Dr. Egan, I know you have said earlier that we're the only school that has not taken a break, you know, with COVID. For instance, Hopog has been in school since September. What they do is the week after a holiday, they don't let the kids come in. They make them go virtual because they understand that people have, you know, are going away or are doing things or are with family, and they don't want to get everybody else sick. So that's why they took off. So they weren't off because of, you know, because they were in quarantine or whatever it is. So why now are you only getting barriers when all other schools have had it for the past year? Did you not know about it before?
The statement, all other schools have had it since last year, is grossly inaccurate.
I'm saying that a lot of schools have had it since last year. Let's not talk about what's inaccurate, because you have said a lot of inaccurate things. Why now? Why are you only doing now getting the barriers when you could have gotten them last year? I know, you know, I don't understand it.
Okay, so during our budget presentation, I think we told the public that the governor had, from the very beginning, from last spring, told us that there was a very good chance that he was going to withhold 10 to 20% of our state aid, which is in the neighborhood of $2 million. The barriers that we need for the high school are over $100,000, right? Money, as much as education is of the utmost importance, we have to be able to pay for these things. And we were looking at things that we were going to have to not do and cut in order to be able to just get through the school year. I mean, $2 million is a lot of money. And we found out in February that we were going to be made whole with our state aid, and we weren't losing that $2 million.
Okay, I don't, but I understand that, but also you put money into other things like sports and stuff like that, when right now education is the most important for these children. That should have been at the top of the list of anything that had to be done, was to get those barriers in. I didn't understand why we didn't have them. I'm sorry?
Teachers got a raise in December.
Yes, but
so the money went to that other.
It doesn't make sense. It just does not make sense to me, and I'm sure to a lot of other people, that why, you know, why is the races important? The kids, if it wasn't for our children in school, they wouldn't have a job. This is what we need. Everything should have been put on hold, you know, for the time being, and get those. You know, those barriers should have been done by the summer. We should have had barriers in every class to start ready for September.
Okay, so according to the guidelines, when we started school, even with barriers, the high school would not have been able to go back because there just wasn't enough space in the classroom to put all the children and still have 6 feet distancing.
Isn't it 6
No,
feet
you
or a
still could have
mask? Isn't that right though? It's 6 feet or a mask?
Oh my God.
And
Yes,
if you
it
had
No,
the barrier,
that's what the new guidance or the new statements are saying, okay? Back in August, Dr. Egan had to sign all those attestations that said that kids were going to be 6 feet apart.
Or you could have met the requirement by,
Okay, stop pulling out first of all.
30 minutes. So
We're done.
you could have met the requirement with physical barriers.
barriers, masks, I mean, there's way too much stuff going on here. I'm
That's
sorry,
fine.
but the board
at that
is
time, we
Thank you,
did not.
Mrs. Scott.
very disappointing, all of us. Dr. Egan, you are also.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you have used your 3 minutes.
That's
Thank
fine.
you. Thank you, Denise.
Okay. So,
Diane, if I can just for a second, I just want to go back. It was a little with, not even to comment, but to Stephen Torrey, as the only student that's come on board tonight to speak, I just want to applaud him for standing up and coming forward and speaking his mind and sharing his thoughts as a student with us. We've talked about student voice a lot, and I think it's something we talk about. I talk about with my own kids, and I want to thank Stephen. I acknowledged him, but I want to go ahead and thank him for having the courage to come on a forum like this and say what he had to say so thoughtfully. So thank you for that.
And thank you, Joe, for acknowledging Stephen Torrey, because the board.
Joe, I know I'm not supposed to interrupt, but I'll tell him that you just said that.
Please do. We'd love to hear from more.
Remember her.
It's a tough audience to come in front of. And so, we all know that. I speak for the board in saying this. We've talked about student voice a lot. So Diane, I just wanted to pause. I think you guys would all support those comments. I know we're not together, but I do appreciate him coming forward. I'd have a hard time looking my daughter in the eyes when I get done with this and not having done that, because we talk about it all the time.
So I just want to say the same thing. In closing, before we went, I was going to say that as well. Since I've been on this board, I advocated for student voice. We spoke very respectfully. Thank you.
did, and he brought up some very valid points. Okay, so we are now going to go to important dates. March 9th. Yes, March 9th will be our special meeting with the rollout of our plan to bring children back 5 days a week. March 16th is the next budget workshop and BOE Board of Education meeting at 7:30. And those are all the dates that I have. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for staying on. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
What a disgrace.
Thanks for nothing.